Do you love novels, but don't have time to read thousands of chapters? Imagine listening to your favorite stories anytime, anywhere, while driving, working, or relaxing. Here, you'll find premium audiobooks from Pocket FM, Audible, Webnovel, Wuxia, and more, all in one place. Every novel is a one-time payment, no subscriptions, no monthly fees, lifetime access. The full novel list and prices are in the description below. Once you choose a novel, just DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-fi, or Patreon, you get permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. And if the novel is ongoing, all future updates are included. Check the description, pick your story, and start listening today. Before we start the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Enjoy, and let's go.
101, Chapter 101, Extra, The Price of Salvation. Who? A heavy silence fell over the entire venue. It was so quiet that you could almost hear your own heartbeat pounding in your ears. Everyone stared, frozen in shock at the scene before them. One must understand, the 12 divine moons are the 12 most powerful warriors serving under the direct command of Shenren Yuan. Each one of them is a top-tier ninja, a force of immense power. There are even rumors that it would only take 3 of the divine moons to completely destroy one of the great ninja villages. If 5 of them were to act together, they could bring an entire country to its knees. And if 6 of the divine moons joined forces, not even the 5 great nations and their legendary ninja villages would stand a chance. It was hard to truly imagine the terrifying reputation these 12 warriors held across the land. More importantly, it was said that the members and ranks of the 12 divine moons were not permanent. They changed often. A change meant that a new warrior had defeated and replaced an existing member, claiming their position and power. It was no exaggeration to say that the influence of the 12 divine moons was felt throughout the entire shinobi world. Yet, at this very moment, Shisui Uchiha, a man who was supposed to be dead, a man who had both of his eyes gouged out not long ago, was standing there, alive and whole. And it wasn't just a simple resurrection. He had already recovered one of his lost eyes, and now, it seemed he had just found his second one as well. Ah! A raw, mournful scream tore through the silence. Uchiha Itachi felt a sense of betrayal so sharp it was like a blade twisting in his gut. The feeling was even worse than the humiliation he suffered when Shenren Yuan defeated him earlier. After all, Shisui Uchiha had been more than just a senior to him. He was a brother, a role model, and the very standard Itachi strived to live up to. It was Shisui's guidance, combined with the manipulations of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, that had slowly molded Itachi into the person he was today, a loyal son of the village, even at the cost of his own clan. And now, it felt as if Shisui had led him down a dark and lonely path, locked the door behind him, and then simply vanished. Before he left, he had even returned just to take back the final gift he had entrusted to Itachi. An overwhelming sense of powerlessness washed over Itachi, and his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees with a heavy thud, his world completely shattered. Is that really Shisui Uchiha? One of the clan members whispered, his voice trembling. It has to be, another replied in awe. He was chosen by Lord Yuan and passed the trial. He's become one of the 12 divine moons. To think, if Shisui hadn't been so devoted to the village's flawed ideals, he would have been another Uchiha with the Mangekyo Sharingan. His strength was always undeniable. But even with all that power, he's only ranked as Upper Moon 6, the last of the upper ranks. It just shows how monstrously strong the other divine moons must be. The powerful members of the Uchiha clan began to murmur amongst themselves. Today, standing before Shenren Yuan, they had witnessed a truly unbelievable spectacle. Though they had all heard the supreme legends about him, none had ever laid eyes on him. But now, they had not only seen Shenren Yuan in person but had also witnessed his godlike power to bend reality with a mere flick of his wrist. It was no wonder the rumors claimed that not even Senju Hashirama, the god of shinobi, or the legendary Uchiha Madara were a match for him. Thinking back to how Itachi had just tried to defy such a being with a single Mangekyo Sharingan, they all came to the same conclusion: the boy was young, foolish, and desperately needed to be taught a lesson. He was truly asking for it. Brother. In the entire arena, perhaps only Sasuke Uchiha felt a pang of sympathy for his older brother, who was now kneeling on the ground, looking as if he wished for death. Unfortunately for Itachi, everyone else, from the clan elders to his own father, Uchiha Fugaku, had only one thought about him now. He deserved it. They had all seen it with their own eyes. The scoundrel had activated his Mangekyo Sharingan and dared to attack Shenron Yueyan. If Itaki had the nerve to challenge a god today, he would surely have the nerve to massacre the entire Uchiha clan tomorrow. Such a vile creature didn't deserve to live. Even cutting him into 1,000 pieces wouldn't be enough to erase the shame he had brought upon them. Uchiha Fugaku. From the ice throne floating in midair, Tsukioko's calm voice cut through the tension. He had been quietly enjoying the farce, but now his gaze fell upon the Uchiha clan chief. You came here seeking me, and you brought the Divine Moon token. Do you have a request? It was said that anyone who possessed one of Shenron Yueyan's Divine Moon tokens could ask for a single favor, and it would be granted. With Yueyan's terrifying power, a power that could move mountains and part seas, it seemed that nothing was impossible. Even reaching up and plucking the stars from the sky felt like a simple task for him. Thump. Hearing those words, Uchiha Fugaku's heart pounded in his chest. He immediately dropped to his knees again, his forehead touching the ground as he held the Divine Moon token up with both hands. Lord Yueyan, on behalf of the entire Uchiha clan, I offer our most sincere apologies for what just happened, he said, his voice filled with a humility that no one had ever heard from him before. Our clan is in a difficult and dangerous position within Konoha and the Land of Fire. We have traitors from within and enemies on the outside. At that moment, Fugaku finally showed his true responsibility as the clan chief. Therefore, I humbly beg you, Lord Yueyan, to intervene and save our clan from ruin. Humbly request Lord Yueyan to intervene. Humbly request Lord Yueyan to intervene. Humbly request Lord Yueyan to intervene. The moment Fugaku's voice faded, every other member of the Uchiha clan knelt and repeated his words in perfect unison. If this had happened before, they would have scoffed at Fugaku's actions. They were the proud Uchiha, who bowed to no one. They might have even shared Itaki's doubts about whether Shenron Yueyan was truly as powerful as the legends claimed. But now they were completely and utterly convinced. They knelt before Shenron Yueyan not with reluctance, but with genuine reverence. They understood that the chance to kneel before him was an opportunity that countless people would seek for their entire lives and never receive. Buzz. With a faint hum, the Divine Moon token vanished from Fugaku's hands and reappeared in Tsukioko's grasp. At the same time, Shursui Uchiha, Upper Moon 6 of the 12 Divine Moons, flickered out of sight, disappearing behind the ice throne. In his place, two new figures cloaked in black robes slowly stepped out. A fierce and overwhelming aura instantly washed over the entire area, pressing down on everyone. It was the aura of invincible power. Uchiha. From the sky, Tsukioko's voice echoed, carrying a hint of nostalgia. It is indeed a clan that produces many talented individuals. It shouldn't just disappear like this. A simple sentence. A final decision. Christmas and New Year special Christmas tree. To celebrate the holidays, I've added a limited time discount on all membership tiers. Join now to unlock advanced chapters and support faster, regular updates. Thank you for reading and supporting the story. 102 Chapter 102 Extra A Pledge in Blood. Whoosh. The venue was once again silent, but this time, the silence was filled with a powerful emotion. Every member of the Uchiha clan, including their leader, Uchiha Fugaku, was trembling with overwhelming relief and hope. In the current shinobi world, no promise was more valuable than a single word from Shenron Yueyan. Though he had only spoken a simple sentence, to them, it was a guarantee that the entire Uchiha clan would be saved. They all knew the truth of their situation. On the surface, the Uchiha clan still held some influence in the Konoha ninja village, but in reality, all the positions of true power were controlled by the Hokage's office. The people who truly ran Konoha were the third Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen, and his council. That council consisted of four key figures: Hiruzen himself, Shimura Danzo, Kohara Yudatan, and Homura Mitokada. Hiruzen, as the Hokage, held the most authority. Right behind him was Shimura Danzo, the shadowy leader of the Root organization, backed by the influence of his own Shimura family. For years, with Hiruzen's quiet approval, Danzo had handled the dark and dirty tasks that the Hokage couldn't be seen doing. In his own mind, Danzo saw himself as the darkness that protected Konoha's light, the roots that held up the tree. Meanwhile, the two great clans that had founded Konoha, the Senju and the Uchiha, had been pushed out of the circle of power. The Senju clan was all but gone. Their last known descendant, Tsunade, one of the legendary Sannin, had long abandoned the village. She now spent her days drinking and gambling, wanting nothing to do with Konoha's political games. Of the other Sannin, Orochimaru had defected, and Jiraiya wandered the world. Clans like the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akimike, as well as the powerful Hyuga clan with their Byakugan, were now nothing more than second-tier families. They were expected to fight and die for the village, but promotions and real power were always kept out of their reach. The Uchiha clan members all turned to look at their leader, Uchiha Fugaku, who stood with a complicated expression on his face. Not long ago, many of them had complained about his leadership. During his time as chief, the Uchiha's status in Konoha had steadily declined. But now, he had secured a promise from Shenron Yuien himself. This single act meant that the future of their clan was now secure. Across the entire shinobi world, there was no one who could defy that promise. Whoosh! At that moment, Fugaku's gaze fell upon his eldest son, Uchiha Itachi, who was still kneeling in a pool of his own blood. He was his son, but their beliefs had driven them so far apart that they had reached this breaking point. Sasuke. Fugaku's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold. Father. Sasuke responded immediately, his heart jumping. Take this shuriken, Fugaku commanded, his voice as frigid as the winter wind. And kill this traitor who dared to offend Lord Tsukiyako. The command sent a violent shiver through Sasuke's entire body. It wasn't just Sasuke who was stunned, every other Uchiha present was shocked into silence. A pledge of allegiance. This was a raw, undeniable pledge of allegiance. Even though Fugaku had brought the Divine Moon token and received Yuien's promise, the Uchiha clan still needed to prove their sincerity. And Itachi, who had not only betrayed his family but had also attacked Lord Tsukiyako, was the perfect sacrifice. At this point, no matter what Itachi's reasons were, his fate was sealed. He had to die. His death would be for the future and the glory of the Uchiha clan. Having Fugaku or another clan member kill him would send a message. But having Sasuke, his own younger brother, deliver the final blow would be a much more powerful statement. It would show that the Uchiha clan had completely and violently severed all ties with the Hokage's office and with traitors like Itachi. It was the ultimate display of their unwavering loyalty to Shenron Yuien. Sasuke, if you kill him today, you will be the next leader of our clan, Fugaku's indifferent voice echoed again. If you don't, you will die with him. The shuriken in Sasuke's hands trembled uncontrollably. He couldn't understand how things had escalated to this point. Why was this happening? He. Suddenly, a low, broken laugh came from Itachi. The man who had been kneeling in complete despair shot to his feet and rushed directly towards Sasuke. Damn it! Several of the Uchiha elders muttered, preparing to intervene. Pfft! But before anyone could move, a sharp sound cut through the air. The shuriken flew from Sasuke's hand and embedded itself deep in Itachi's chest, right over his heart. Bang! Itachi's body slammed heavily onto the ground. He was dead. There was no doubt about it. Thud. Sasuke, having killed for the first time in his life, collapsed to his knees, his face streaming with tears. Uchiha. Fugaku, you are quite an interesting man, Tsukiyako's calm voice stated from above. You may all leave. What happens next has little to do with you. He paused, his voice dropping. Remember, from this day forward, the lives of every Uchiha belong to me. The moment he finished speaking, every member of the Uchiha clan, including Fugaku, bowed their heads to the ground in absolute respect. Farewell, Lord Tsukiyako. Farewell, Lord Tsukiyako. Farewell, Lord Tsukiyako. Even Sasuke, lost in his pain, was pulled down by Fugaku to kneel properly. The clan chief had just gambled everything, his son's life, his clan's dignity, and had successfully secured their future. Now, it was Konoha's turn to face the terrifying power of Shenron Yuien. He was eager to see how Sarutobi Hiruzen and the others would handle it. Fugaku glanced down at Sasuke, who had already fallen unconscious from the shock. Sasuke, don't blame me for this, he thought, his own eyes flickering with a hidden power. As an Uchiha who had also awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, he had seen the future. He had seen the path Itachi was on, a path that would have led to the complete annihilation of their clan. Faced with that terrible vision, he made his choice. He would pretend he never had that son. Only by clinging to Shenron Yuien could the Uchiha clan find a glimmer of hope for survival in the coming storm. Christmas and New Year special Christmas tree. To celebrate the holidays, I've added a limited time discount on all membership tiers. Join now to unlock advanced chapters and support faster, regular updates. Thank you for reading and supporting the story. 103, Chapter 103, Extra, The Creator's Chessboard. Alright, you can leave now. Just as Uchiha Fugaku and his clan were still reeling from the shock of the recent events, one of the two black-robed figures from the 12 Divine Moons spoke calmly. With a low buzzing sound, the world around them distorted. The next moment, they found themselves back in the desolate ruins of Whirlpool Village. It felt as if everything that had just happened was a dream, a strange and vivid illusion. But the cold, lifeless body of Uchiha Itachi on the ground and the sight of the two figures still floating in mid-air proved that it was all real. They had successfully met the legendary being known throughout the shinobi world, a man whose story seemed to span its entire history, the divine being, Tsukiyako. More importantly, they had received his promise. This meant that from this day forward, the Uchiha clan would not only survive, they would rise again. Times change, one of the black-robed figures said, his voice indifferent. The Uchiha clan has fallen far from its former glory. When you came here, you had many tales following you. You probably didn't even notice, did you? Whoosh. The word sent a jolt of alarm through Fugaku and the others. They had no idea they were being followed. It made sense, though. The clan's recent activities had surely attracted the attention of Sarutobi Hiruzen and the other village elders. It was only natural that they would dispatch Umbu agents to monitor their every move. Since Lord Tsukiyako has given you his word, we will handle the rest, the other black-robed figure added, his tone just as calm. You may go. Hearing this, Fugaku and the other Uchiha warriors were once again startled. These two were also members of the 12 Divine Moons. A ninja as famously skilled as Shursui Uchiha, a man known for both his incredible power and his cunning, was only ranked as Upper Moon 6. That meant these two mysterious figures had to be ranked even higher. With powerhouses like them taking action, the Uchiha's crisis could likely be solved without the divine being having to lift a finger. Quick! Fugaku ordered his men. Hurry! Under the watchful eyes of the two black-robed figures, the Uchiha clan members, led by their chief, quickly turned and fled the scene. Among those tales, there seemed to be some old acquaintances of yours from Konoha, aren't there? One of the figures said to the other after the Uchiha were gone. It seems so, the other replied with a hint of amusement. This looks like a rare opportunity to settle some old scores. Their gazes met for a brief moment before they both vanished into the sky. Buzz. At that same moment, inside the Blood God Art, Infinity Kingdom, an evolved version of his old Blood Demon Art, Infinity Castle, Tsukiyako's eyes snapped open. The space before him transformed into a vast cosmos filled with a myriad of stars. Each star pulsed with a distinct life force. The 12 brightest stars closest to him were the 12 Kazuki he had cultivated back in the Demon Slayer world. He remembered the final battle in that world, at the home of the Japanese imperial family. The combined forces of the priest clan and the imperial family were no match for him. However, at the most critical moment, the world will of the Demon Slayer world had directly intervened, causing the entire world to reject his existence. Even though Tsukiyako had achieved his transformation into a perfect being, he couldn't completely overcome the backlash from an entire world's consciousness. His only option was to recall all the blood he had distributed, reabsorbing that power back into himself. In a short time, his abilities soared past the limits of that world. But because of this, the Demon Slayer world could no longer withstand his presence. In his final moments there, he laid out his last plans, using the remaining members of the 9 Pillars, Shinobu Koko and Mitsurai Kenroji. He was confident that by now, in the current timeline of that world, the entire nation of Japan had transformed into a kingdom of demons. All thanks to the parting gift he had left inside Shinobu and Mitsurai. Now, as he looked at the countless stars before him, he knew that each one was a being he had once turned into a demon. Tsukiyako could feel that as his power continued to grow, he would one day be able to reforge every single one of these consciousnesses into a living being once more. When that day came, he would truly become a creator. Heaven and earth are but an inn for all things. Time is a passing guest over generations, Tsukiyako sighed, his handsome face untouched by the passage of time. And life is like a dream. How much joy is there to be found in it? A century had passed since he first arrived in the Naruto world. He had watched the shinobi world develop and evolve, always remaining in the shadows. But now, On the eve of the Uchiha clan's prophesied doom, he, the divine being Tsukiyako, was finally going to make his move. The world will of this place is different from the Demon Slayer worlds, he mused. Here, bloodline determines everything. The legendary battles between Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara, and the fated conflict between the current reincarnations, Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha, all prove this point. But in Tsukiyako's grand calculations, it didn't matter whether the reincarnation of Ashura or Indra won. In the end, both outcomes served the natural course of this world. What Tsukiyako wanted was something more. He planned to create a true empire of his own, but the word demon felt too crude for his ambitions. After all, he was aiming for an ascension to the level of a creator. Therefore, the nation he would build would be a truly perfect nation. And in such a nation, every inhabitant would be a perfect being. It would be an absolute, perfect world. Now, the wheel of fate begins to turn, Tsukiyako whispered, his gaze seeming to pierce through reality itself. But from this moment on, the players and the pieces on the board will change. His eyes surveyed the entire shinobi world as if it were his personal chessboard. The 5 great nations, the 5 great ninja villages, the shadowy Akatsuki, the scheming Orochimaru, the mysterious Zetsu, and even the legendary Uchiha Madara hiding in the darkness, all of them were now pieces for him to command. 104, Chapter 104, Extra, Old Scores. Whoosh, whoosh. Deep within the jungle, the Uchiha clan members moved like shadows, their feet barely touching the ground. Led by Uchiha Fugaku, they pushed their speed to the absolute limit, holding their breath and focusing every ounce of their energy on escaping. Seeking out Shenron Yueyen at such a sensitive time had been an incredible risk, but their gamble had paid off. They had not only found the legendary figure but had also secured his promise through the Divine Moon token and a pledge of blood. Although it was only a verbal agreement, they treasured it as the greatest blessing their clan could have ever received. Fugaku thought back to the 2 mysterious, black-robed figures. They had to be members of the 12 Divine Moons. A terrifyingly powerful being like Shenron Yueyen wouldn't handle every little thing himself. It was only natural that he would have subordinates. However, it was clear that becoming one of his followers was no simple task. Even a prodigy like Shursui Uchiha, a master of the Mangekyo Sharingan, was only ranked as Upper Moon 6. This meant there were at least 5 other beings in the organization whose power and skills were even more terrifying than his. Any one of them was likely as strong, if not stronger, than a Kage. No matter how you look at it, sacrificing one Uchiha Itaki in exchange for the support of Shenron Yueyen was a massively profitable deal for us, Fugaku thought as he raced through the trees. He felt no guilt for forcing his own son to his death. In fact, beyond the cold logic of the decision, he felt a strange and faint satisfaction, though he couldn't quite understand why. Now, all they had to do was wait and see what Shenron Yueyen's followers were capable of. Whoosh, whoosh. Almost at the same moment the last Uchiha disappeared from the ruins of Whirlpool Village, several figures emerged from the shadows. The group was led by 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman, though it was clear they were not of equal rank. Humph, the trail went completely cold here. What did they do? Burrow into the ground? One of the men complained, his voice sharp. Keep searching. We have to find them. He turned his cold gaze toward a young boy dressed in the uniform of the Hokage's personal Umbu guard. I made a promise to my father on this mission, and I even brought you along to make sure it succeeded. Unlike the other Umbu, this boy had a bandage wrapped over his left eye. To most, it would look like a simple injury. But the man knew that the eye hidden beneath that bandage was the source of the boy's formidable reputation across the shinobi world. He was the copy ninja, Kakashi Hatake. Everyone, stay alert, the woman in the group advised calmly. Remember, our mission is to track them, not to engage directly. The rest of the squad quickly spread out, while the man and woman moved closer together. I knew it. For the Uchiha to be making secret moves at a time like this, something big must be going on, the man said. But did they really think their actions could escape the notice of Sarutobi Shinosuke? The man's name was Sarutobi Shinosuke, the eldest son of the 3rd Hokage, Sarutobi Hiruzen. He was an important figure in Konoha and the current director of the Umbu. The woman beside him was his wife, who would one day become the mother of Konohamaru. That's true, but we're deep in enemy territory. We have to be careful, she whispered, then glanced toward Kakashi. And, why did you have to bring him along? She asked, her voice low. If that boy ever learns the truth about what happened to his father, Sakumo Heitake, won't he turn on us? A cold, cruel smile spread across Shinashuk's face. Hee, there's nothing to worry about. Sakumo Heitake, the so-called Konoha White Fan. He was just a good-for-nothing failure who was cast out by everyone. A smug look filled his eyes. That final mission of his was impossible from the start. We designed it as a trap specifically for him. His voice turned colder as he continued. The Heitake family is prominent in Konoha, and Sakumo was the Umbu director at the time. A position that important cannot be left in the hands of someone outside the Sarutobi clan. It would threaten the Hokage's rule. Under those circumstances, what did it matter if the White Fan was a hero who had served Konoha his entire life? Shinashuk was clearly proud of his scheme. It takes a lot to become a hero. You have to face death time and time again. But to destroy a hero, that is an incredibly simple matter. A vicious smile twisted his lips. I'm sure you don't know this, but all those whispers and taunts from the villagers, the public shaming, I arranged all of it personally. You also can't imagine how exhilarating it was, how comfortable I felt, when I finally heard that Sakumo Heitake had killed himself. He was about to say more, but his wife interrupted him. Stop, don't say any more. I have something to tell you. She took a breath. I'm pregnant. What? The simple sentence wiped the smug look right off Shinashuk's face. He looked as if he had just been forced to eat a pile of dirt. He had only been toying with this woman. His father was the third Hokage, after all. He could have any woman he wanted. Countless ninja families in Konoha would have gladly offered up their daughters. But he never expected that a careless incident on a mission in the outdoors would lead to this. I want to keep the child, the woman said firmly. Wait. Shinashuk cut her off, his eyes suddenly snapping toward the distance. He ignored her completely. In his line of sight, two men in black robes, each bearing the symbol of a blood-red moon, were walking slowly toward them. In that instant, Sarutobi Shinashuk felt his heart hammer against his ribs, the blood running cold in his veins. 105, Chapter 105, Extra. I haven't been the Konoha White Fan for many years. Buzz. Time itself seemed to freeze. Every ninja on the scene stood completely still, their minds struggling to process what they were seeing. The two black-robed figures walking slowly toward them were shrouded in mystery, yet they radiated an aura of unfathomable terror. Thump, thump, thump. In an instant, they could all feel their own hearts hammering against their ribs. An emotion they hadn't felt in a long time, pure, primal fear, seized them. How is this possible? One of the Umbu whispered. They're just two men in robes, why is the aura they're giving off so terrifying? Could they be some kind of legendary shinobi? It wasn't just the rank-and-file ninja who were stunned. Even the young man known as the copy ninja, Kakashi Heitake, felt a cold knot of dread form in his stomach. For an opponent to project such an overwhelming presence without even making a move was a sign of immense power. They were deep in enemy territory, on a mission to track the powerful Uchiha clan. If something went wrong here, the consequences would be more than they could possibly bear. What were they supposed to do? Kakashi wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Sarutobi Shinashuk, the Hokage's own son, felt as if the venomous gaze of a snake was fixed upon him. He could clearly sense that one of the black-robed figures had been staring directly at him from the moment they appeared. They were obviously powerful enough to have ambushed them from the shadows, yet they chose to reveal themselves openly. This could only mean one thing: they saw the Umbu squad as completely insignificant. Normally, being underestimated might be good news, but Shinashuk had a sickening feeling that their opponent's strength was truly on another level. More importantly, he knew that the only ones on his team who stood a chance in a real fight were himself and Kakashi. His wife, though an elite jonin, was pregnant and couldn't use her full strength. And while only two enemies were visible, who knew how many more were lurking in the shadows? Kakashi, attack! Shinashuk thought, transmitting the order secretly using Umbu hand signals. As the second-in-command, Kakashi was the perfect tool. He could use the boy to test the enemy's strength. There was another, darker reason for his decision. He had been the one to slander and destroy Kakashi's father, the once famous Konoha White Fan, Sakumo Heitake. If that truth ever came out, the boy would become a major problem. If he could use this opportunity to get Kakashi killed, or at least seriously wounded, he could eliminate that future threat for good. Whoosh! The instant the order was given, Kakashi moved, his hands blurring through a series of seals. His body shot forward, and as he leaped into the air, 3 identical copies of himself appeared beside him. It was the Shadow Clone Jutsu. At the same time, the other Umbu members threw a wave of shuriken to cover his approach. "Quick, fall back." Shinashuk ordered his loyalists the moment Kakashi engaged. A cold smile touched his lips. The ninja closest to him immediately began to retreat. His wife watched with a solemn expression, her heart sinking. Shinashuk was using Kakashi as a shield. She wasn't surprised. She knew better than anyone that her husband was a man of mediocre strength, indecisive and terrified of death. She hadn't fallen for him because of his ability, but because of his family name. His strength was average, yet he was the Umbu director. A true genius like Kakashi, famous throughout the shinobi world, was just an ordinary Umbu. Being born into the right family was clearly more important than talent or hard work. Damn it! Kakashi cursed under his breath. He saw Shinashuk and the others retreating, and his face twisted with anger. If his commander could sense the enemy's power, then of course he, a far more skilled ninja, could sense it too. At a critical moment like this, instead of working together, his own leader was using him as cannon fodder. This was the result of the third Hokage's policy: hire your relatives, no matter how useless they are. If we die here, do you really think you'll be able to escape, Shinashuk? Kakashi thought bitterly, a cold glint in his eye as he prepared his next attack. Buzz! At that same moment, the eyes of the 2 black-robed figures met. One of them remained perfectly still. The other vanished. What? How is that possible? Amid the shocked cries from Kakashi and his clones, the black-robed figure reappeared, moving with blinding speed. He completely ignored Kakashi's attack and shot directly toward the retreating Shinashuk. Oh no! Shinashuk screamed as he and his men watched in undisguised horror. Swish! A brilliant sword light flashed under the moonlight, as beautiful and deadly as 1,000 feathers dancing in the wind. Puff! 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 In a single instant, fountains of blood erupted from the necks of every ninja standing beside Sarutobi Shinashuk. This is... Shinashuk stared, his mind reeling. That impossibly fast sword style stirred a memory from the darkest corner of his heart. Impossible. It's impossible. Absolutely impossible. That man, the hero of Konoha, the former Umbu director, the legend with the great reputation, was dead. He had made sure of it. He had persecuted him, smeared his name, and drove him to take his own life. How can you still be alive? Shinashuk's voice rose to a hysterical roar. Konoha white-fanned, Sakumo Heitake, you're already dead. Puff. The moment the name left his lips, both of his arms flew from his body, severed at the shoulder as dark red blood sprayed into the air. From the shadows, the man's calm voice echoed. Sarutobi clan's heir. I haven't been the Konoha white fan for many years. 106, Chapter 106, Extra, The 12 Divine Moons. A stunned silence fell over the clearing, so absolute it was terrifying. The words, Konoha white fan, hung in the air, freezing everyone in place. Kakashi Heitake felt as if the world had tilted on its axis. His father, the man he believed had chosen a coward's death by suicide, was supposedly standing right in front of him. Nearby, Sarutobi Shinashuk's wife was just as shocked, but for a different reason. If this man truly was Heitake Sakumo, then their situation had just become impossible. There was no way this would end peacefully. A man who had already died once would surely have uncovered the truth behind his death. His appearance at this exact moment couldn't be a coincidence. Kakashi Heitake. Sarutobi Shinashuk's roar shattered the silence. A sharp, searing pain shot through him as he stared at the stumps where his arms had been. The black-robed man's single strike had disarmed him completely. Even if his wife tried to help, she wouldn't be fast enough. There was only one person who could possibly intervene in time. Shinashuk knew it was ironic. He had been the one who orchestrated Heitake Sakumo's downfall, yet now he was desperately trying to buy time. He didn't care if this man was the real Konoha white fan or just an imposter. By attacking them, he had made himself an enemy of Konoha. And Kakashi, a member of the Hokage's personal Umbu guard, was under his command. Forcing a son to fight his own father, it was a cruel but brilliant tactic. In that split second, even as he bled out, Shinashuk felt a surge of pride at his own cleverness. But his pride was short-lived. Another flash of silver light cut through the air, and Shinashuk screamed as both of his ears were sliced clean off. An overwhelming wave of pain crashed over him, threatening to drag him into unconsciousness. Damn it! The sight spurred the other Umbu members into action. They didn't hesitate, charging toward the black-robed figure from all sides. It no longer mattered who he was, the legendary Heitake Sakumo returned from the dead or some impostor using his name. All that mattered was saving Sarutobi Shinashuk. If they failed, they would face a fate worse than death when they returned to the village. Shinashuk wasn't just the leader of the Hokage Umbu, he was the eldest son of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He was, for all intents and purposes, the crown prince of Konoha. If he died here, Lord Third's wrath would be unimaginable. None of their families would be safe. They had to save him, no matter the cost. Kill him. With a furious cry, Shinashuk's wife, an elite Jonin herself, lunged at the black-robed man. At the same time, Kakashi moved to intercept him from the opposite direction. He couldn't let Shinashuk die. As much as he despised the man for what he'd done, the consequences of his death would be catastrophic for Konoha. Even if this mysterious attacker truly was his father, he had to be stopped. Let them handle their own affairs. A calm, detached voice echoed through the air, stopping Kakashi and the other Umbu dead in their tracks. An immense pressure suddenly crushed down on them, heavy and suffocating. It felt as if the very air had become solid, pinning them in place. Strange, fleeting images flashed through their minds, and they struggled to breathe under the invisible weight. It was terrifying. This man's power was on a completely different level. Stop him, please, stop him. Shinashuk shrieked as he saw the terrifying white blade swing toward him again. Though he had lost his arms and ears, his legs still worked. He scrambled backward, trying desperately to escape. That familiar fighting style, that blade, it had to be Heitake Sakumo. But the man had said he hadn't been the White Fan for years. Either he had somehow come back to life, or something far stranger was going on. Whatever the truth was, the power gap between them was as wide as the sky. And this man was clearly here to kill him. Fear and rage boiled inside Shinashuk, erupting in a panicked, incoherent shout. Do you know who I am? Damn you. He began to ramble, his words slurring together. I'm the son of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Of Konoha, in the Land of Fire, one of the 5 great shinobi nations. I'm the young chief of the Sarutobi clan. You can't kill me. Death felt so close now, a cold presence breathing down his neck. And do you know who I am? The black-robed man's voice thundered in his ears. Crack. A sickening crunch echoed as Shinashuk's legs were severed just below the knees. He collapsed to the ground with a wet thud, his body now just a helpless torso. Who are you? He whimpered, his face pressed into the dirt. He was no better than a wild dog now, utterly broken. The man's voice boomed across the clearing, filled with cold, absolute power. I am upper rank 5 of the 12 divine moons, under the command of Lord Tsukiyako. My name is Heitake Sakumo. He paused, letting the words sink in. And I am here to settle my account with you. As his voice faded, the air grew sharp with a new kind of stillness. Kakashi and the other Konoha ninja could only stare, their eyes wide with disbelief. The man before them wasn't just the resurrected hero of Konoha. He was now something else entirely, a high-ranking monster serving a mysterious being named Tsukiyako. 107, Chapter 107, Extra. Your name is Heitake. Heitake Sakumo. Konoha's White Fan. A member of the 12 divine moons. A servant of the godlike being, Yueyen. Each title was enough to shake the shinobi world to its core. The legend of the White Fan was great, but it was nothing compared to the power of Yueyen. Now, seeing Heitake Sakumo, a man who was supposed to be dead, return as one of Yueyen's elite followers changed everything. The 12 divine moons. Sarutobi Shinashuk stammered, his mind reeling from the revelation. Does this mean, the Uchiha clan went to see him? They went to Lord Yueyen. The words hit him like a physical blow. Konoha was already on a knife's edge, with the powerful Uchiha clan threatening to rebel at any moment. The third Hokage's faction had been working tirelessly to keep them in check, using spies and military pressure. Their greatest fear was that the Uchiha would find a powerful ally. That was the very reason Shinashuk and his Umbu unit were here, to monitor the Uchiha clan's every move. They had never imagined that the Uchiha wouldn't just have a trump card, but that their trump card would be Yueyen himself. Yueyen was a name that inspired terror across the 5 great nations. If the founders of Konoha, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, represented the pinnacle of shinobi power, then Yuien was something else entirely, a being who stood above them all, invincible. He had vanished years ago, and the world had settled into a fragile peace. But hearing his name now, from the mouth of a dead man, sent a wave of pure dread through Shinashuk. Go to hell. In a blur of motion, Shinashuk's wife appeared behind Sakumo. She had seen him butcher her husband, and she didn't care about his past or his identity. He was the enemy, and the only thing to do with an enemy was to kill them. He had destroyed the man she loved, her future husband and Konoha's next potential Hokage. He had shattered all of her plans. For that, he had to die. Fire style. She yelled. Shuriken infused with fire chakra flew through the air, aimed directly at Sakumo's back. Die. She screamed, unleashing a storm of explosive tags that rained down on his position. Boom. A series of violent explosions rocked the clearing, sending waves of heat and force in every direction. But before the smoke could even clear, Shinashuk cried out in warning. Watch out. Heh. A little late to react, don't you think? Sakumo's voice was right beside her. She barely had time to turn her head before he moved. Two simple, impossibly fast slashes of his blade flashed in the dim light. Her arm dissolved into a mist of blood before she even felt the pain. A moment later, a powerful kick slammed into her stomach, the force of it lifting her off her feet and sending her flying backward. She hit the ground hard, blood pouring from her mouth. No. She gasped. No. Shinashuk wailed from where he lay on the ground, a bloody, limbless wreck. He knew his wife was pregnant. He should have told her to run, to get away. Now, it was too late. A chilling silence once again descended on the battlefield. Not far away, Kakashi and the other Anbu were frozen in place, held captive by the immense pressure from the second black-robed figure. They could only watch in stunned horror. He was too strong. It was a one-sided slaughter. Sakumo moved with an unnerving precision, as if he knew every move they would make before they made it. Every strike was like lightning, delivered with an almost casual grace. The elite Anbu of Konoha, some of the most skilled ninja in the village, were like helpless ants before him, easily crushed. Is this really him? Kakashi whispered, his mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. This cold, merciless killer couldn't be the same person as the father he remembered. In the blink of an eye, Sakumo crossed the distance between them, appearing at Kakashi's side as silently as a ghost. Do you remember your surname? Sakumo asked, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. The suffocating pressure intensified around Kakashi, forcing him to his knees. He struggled to breathe, to think. Haytake. He managed to force out. Good, Sakumo said, and the pressure eased slightly. Remember that. Your name is Haytake. Not Sarutobi. And certainly not Konoha. The word struck Kakashi harder than any physical blow, shattering the image of the father he thought he knew. The Konoha white fan who had died in shame, broken by the village and its leaders, was gone. This man shared his name and face, but he was a complete stranger. You. Kakashi started to say, his voice low and trembling. Slice. At that exact moment, the heads of Sarutobi Shinashuk and his wife were severed from their bodies, flying through the air in a silent arc. Blood sprayed across the ground, and its thick, metallic scent filled the air. The terrifying aura in the clearing grew even colder, even heavier. The Anbu were no strangers to death. They had all killed and seen their comrades die. But the scene before them, a former hero of their village executing his targets with such cold efficiency, felt like a nightmare. They felt as if they had been dragged into the depths of hell itself. 108, Chapter 108, Extra, A Son's Awakening. There was a time when Haytake Sakumo would have gladly died for Konoha. He had dedicated his entire life to the village and the will of fire. But that man was gone, having already died once. Now, such ideals meant nothing to him. The only thing he believed in, the only authority he followed, was the word of Lord Yuien. To Sakumo and the other members of the 12 Divine Moons, Yuien was the only true hope for the shinobi world. They believed the current system, with its 5 great nations and hidden villages constantly vying for power, was a temporary phase. Soon, all of it would fall under the rule of Lord Yuien. Only then would the world finally enter the golden age it was meant for. Compared to that grand vision, everything else was meaningless. They're dead, all of them. Kakashi stared at the carnage, his body frozen in shock. He couldn't connect the ruthless, decisive killer who stood before him with the broken father he remembered, the man who had given in to depression and taken his own life. He had suspected for a long time that there was more to his father's death, but the truth was far more horrifying than he could have imagined. Years of indoctrination by the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, had shaped Kakashi's worldview. But his father's simple, cutting words had shattered that foundation. Your name is Hatake. Not Sarutobi. And not Konoha. A person must live for themselves before they can live for others. If you can't even stand on your own, then nothing else matters. The tragedy of Kakashi's life may not have been directly caused by Hiruzen, but the Hokage's influence was undeniably tied to it. His father's lesson was clear: a shinobi needed to have his own thoughts, his own will. He needed to understand his own goals instead of blindly following the orders of others. Kakashi, my son, think about it carefully, Sakumo's voice echoed one last time. A sudden, violent wind swept through the jungle, kicking up a thick cloud of dust and leaves that obscured everything from view. When it finally settled, Sakumo was gone. Kakashi was left standing alone in a field of dismembered corpses. The other ninja who had accompanied him were all dead, their bodies torn apart. The most gruesome sight was the headless remains of Sarutobi Shinnashuk and his wife. Blood soaked the ground, the metallic smell thick in the air. Even for a seasoned shinobi like Kakashi, who was no stranger to the horrors of the battlefield, the scene was monstrous. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The control he held over his emotions finally snapped. With a choked cry, Kakashi collapsed to his knees, his face twisted in agony. He thought he had become numb to sadness after losing his teammate Obito Uchiha and then Rin Noara. He was wrong. The events of this day had struck him in a way he never thought possible, forcing him into a painful, instantaneous maturity. In that moment, surrounded by death, Kakashi Hatake stopped being a mere puppet of the Konoha ninja village. He finally began to think for himself. An hour later, in the Hokage's office in Konoha, the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, was preparing to use his crystal ball to observe the village when he felt a sudden sense of unease. A moment later, several Umbu appeared, kneeling before his desk. Lord Hokage, one of them reported urgently, we lost contact with Captain Shinnashuk and his team half an hour ago. At the same time, the Uchiha clan members who were on patrol have all returned to the village, but one person is missing, Taki Uchiha. Hiruzen's face, usually a mask of calm authority, instantly darkened. In his intricate plans for the village, Itachi was a critical piece. It was rare to find a weapon as perfect as him, a prodigy so thoroughly brainwashed that he genuinely believed he was upholding justice by betraying his own family. If the will of fire was truly so righteous, Hiruzen thought grimly, he would be the one cleaning toilets while an Uchiha became the next Hokage. If Itachi is missing, our plans for the Uchiha clan will have to be adjusted, Hiruzen muttered to himself, his mind racing. He was a master of internal politics. He and Danzo Shimura had orchestrated the near-complete dismantling of the once mighty Senju clan under the guise of integrating them into the village. Tsunade had sensed something was wrong and fled Konoha years ago, but no one else had ever caught on. But the more pressing question is, what happened to Shinnashuk? A cold, calculating look entered his eyes. Could the Uchiha have attacked them? He dismissed the thought almost immediately. The current Uchiha clan chief, Fugaku, lacked the courage for such a bold move. Wait. Shinnashuk took that Hatake boy with him this time. Kakashi, Hiruzen realized with a jolt. He knew that his son, Shinnashuk, had been involved in the plot that drove Sakumo to suicide. While Hiruzen hadn't personally ordered it, he had known about it. He had then taken Kakashi under his wing, carefully ensuring the boy never learned the truth. But with Shinnashuk now missing, Kakashi had become a dangerous loose end. This is bad. This is very bad. Just then, another ninja flickered into the room, his face pale with terror. Lord Hokage. There's a problem with the village's protective barrier. A divine moon anomaly has appeared in the sky. He took a shaky breath, his voice barely a whisper. We think Lord Yuyen is about to appear. The name hung in the air, and the office was plunged into a dead, terrifying silence. 109, Chapter 109, Extra, The Roots of Darkness. The name echoed in the Hokage's office, and a suffocating silence fell over the room. Lord Yuyen. Just 2 words, but they carried enough weight to freeze the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, in place. The fury he felt just moments ago was instantly replaced by a deep, primal fear. The younger ninja in the room felt a chill, having grown up hearing whispered legends of the godlike being who once ruled the shadows of their world. But Hiruzen had lived through that era. He knew the legends were not just stories. He knew the true terror that the name Yuan represented, which was precisely why the 5 great nations had entered an unspoken pact to erase him from history. Yuan was not just a powerful shinobi, he was a force of nature, an entity so far above everyone else that the only proper response was to bow in submission. What is happening? Hiruzen's mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Decades ago, Yuan and his 12 divine moons vanished without a trace. Their disappearance was as sudden and mysterious as their arrival. He had always prided himself on being the strongest Hokage, but he knew it was a hollow boast. He couldn't compare to the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, the god of shinobi who could tame the tailed beasts. He lacked the raw creativity and speed of the second Hokage, Tobirama Senju. He didn't have the world-changing power of the fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash. While they had built Konoha and defended it with legendary strength, Hiruzen's legacy was one of political maneuvering and internal strife. The Sannin had fractured under his leadership, the White Fang had died in disgrace, and both the Senjo and Uchiha clans had withered away. He was a master of conspiracy, but conspiracy was useless against a true god. And Yuan was the closest thing to a god the shinobi world had ever known, a being who could have easily crushed both Hashirama and Madara Uchiha at the height of their power. Even now, in his prime, Hiruzen felt a familiar dread coiling in his stomach at the thought of facing him again. Bang! The office door was thrown open, and a short, bandaged figure stormed in. It was Shimura Danzo, the darkness that festered at the root of Konoha. He was a man so synonymous with conspiracy that if a tragedy occurred and no culprit could be found, the entire shinobi world would simply agree that Danzo was behind it. Danzo, why are you here? Hiruzen asked, his voice tight with irritation at the blatant disrespect. No matter their history, he was still the Hokage. Why am I here? Don't pretend you don't know, Hiruzen, Danzo shot back, his one visible eye burning with cold fury. I told you we needed to eliminate the Uchiha clan. I said they were an unstable element that threatened the entire village. Now, look what's happened. His face contorted into a snarl. They are a clan of traitors, deserving of death. Our spy, Itake, has gone missing. We lost our chance with Shisui and his Mangekyo Sharingan. The Uchiha are out of control. He stepped closer to the desk, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. I don't care if this Yuan has truly returned or not. This is our chance. The village is in a state of emergency. We must act against the Uchiha immediately, while we have the justification. He fixed his gaze on Hiruzen, a silent challenge passing between them. Danzo had always seen himself as the true protector of Konoha, the one willing to make the hard, bloody sacrifices that Hiruzen was too soft for. If Hiruzen was the light of the village, he and his root organization were the darkness that allowed that light to exist. He had bled for Konoha, and he believed he was owed the power to lead it. This matter requires careful consideration, Danzo, Hiruzen said finally, his tone heavy. The threat of Yuan was too great to make any rash decisions. Sarutobi. Danzo's face turned ugly with rage. This is our best and perhaps only chance. We have to move now. Danzo. Hiruzen's voice cut through the air like a whip. He stood up, his presence filling the room with the authority he rarely used. I am the Hokage. For a moment, Danzo's face went blank with shock, then it hardened into a mask of pure fury. You will regret this, he hissed. He turned on his heel, strode to the door, and slammed it shut behind him with a resounding bang that echoed the coming storm. 110, Chapter 110, Extra, 3 days. Damn him. The moment Danzo Shimura stepped out of the Hokage's office, his face twisted into a sinister snarl. His outwardly civil relationship with Hiruzen Sarutobi was a complete sham. For Danzo, life was meaningless unless he could one day overthrow Hiruzen and claim the title of Hokage for himself. Even now, the memory of the test their teacher, the second Hokage Tobirama Senju, had given them decades ago burned in his heart. They had been ambushed by the gold and silver brothers of the Hidden Cloud. To decide his successor, Tobirama asked which of them would volunteer to stay behind as a decoy, a certain death sentence. Danzo, ever the pragmatist, had hesitated. But Hiruzen had stepped forward without a second thought, earning their master's approval. Though Danzo eventually found his courage, the moment had passed. He had lost. Hiruzen had returned to Konoha and, with cunning that Danzo had gravely underestimated, consolidated his power, marginalizing the Uchiha and Senju clans to secure his position. Danzo now understood that Hiruzen had been playing the long game from the very beginning. To maintain a balance of power, Hiruzen had allowed Danzo to form his root organization, letting him do the dirty work from the shadows. But in Danzo's twisted mind, this was not a privilege, it was simply Hiruzen paying a debt. After all, he had stolen the Hokage title that rightfully belonged to him. A cold, cruel smile spread across Danzo's face. Sarutobi, you fool. This isn't some rogue ninja you've provoked. This is a god who once brought the entire shinobi world to its knees. He remembered the Nine Tails attack, an incident that had cost Konoha its fourth Hokage. If this crisis can kill another Hokage, he thought, his smile widening, then my root organization can finally step out of the shadows and into the light. No one wants to live their entire life as a rat in the dark, least of all Shimura Danzo. That man is becoming more outrageous by the day. Hiruzen fumed inside his office. Danzo's insolence was infuriating. Yet, he knew that Danzo and his root organization were a necessary evil. They handled the clandestine operations that kept Konoha safe, taking on the blame and the darkness so that Hiruzen could maintain the village's honorable facade. But the immediate problem is Lord Tsukiyako. Before he could think further, a figure blurred into the room. Dad, we have a huge problem. It was a young, frantic Asuma Sarutobi, his face pale with distress. The village barrier, there's something wrong with it. Quick, you have to come see. At that very moment, a shift occurred that was felt by every person in Konoha. From the Hyuga to the Uchiha to the members of the Inoshikacho trio, every shinobi felt an immense, terrifying power descend upon the village, locking it in a suffocating grip. Konoha's legendary barrier, a defense thought to be impenetrable, offered no resistance at all. The bright afternoon sky instantly turned to an unnatural, starless night. What's happening? Why did it get so dark? Are we being attacked? Panic erupted on the streets. It had only been a little over a decade since the Nine Tails rampage, and the fear of that day was still fresh in the minds of many. Was another catastrophe about to befall their home? That's the divine moon anomaly, the head of the Nara clan whispered, his face grim as he stared at the sky. High above the village, specks of light began to appear in the blackness. One by one, 12 distinct, ethereal moons materialized, each one pulsing with a profound and ancient power. The sight sent a wave of terror through the civilian population. But for the shinobi who knew the old histories, it was a vision of absolute despair. 12 divine moons. It could only mean one thing. Lord Tsukiyako. They couldn't comprehend it. Why was the godlike being who had once been unrivaled in the entire shinobi world returning now? And why was he making Konoha his first target? Even the combined strength of legends like Hashirama Senjo and Madara Uchiha had been nothing to him. Now, he hadn't even appeared himself, but the presence of his 12 divine moons was already overwhelming. As they watched in horror, 2 of the 12 moons began to glow with blinding intensity. 2 black-robed figures descended from the heavens, landing silently on the roof of the Hokage Tower. An unfathomable aura washed over the village, forcing weaker ninja to their knees. Their voices then boomed across Konoha, speaking as one. It was a sound like a great bell, resonating not in the ears, but in the very soul of every listener. We are the 12 divine moons, servants of Lord Tsukiyako. In 3 days, our Lord will personally arrive in the village hidden in the leaves to interrogate the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The words hung in the air, followed by a moment of complete, stunned silence before the entire village erupted into chaos. 111, Chapter 111, Extra, The Serpent in Konoha. Boom! The air itself seemed to shatter. An unnatural silence fell over the entire village of Konoha, replacing the usual sounds of life with a thick, suffocating dread. Every villager, from civilians to shinobi, was frozen in a state of terrifying shock. For years, the village had been led by the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. While his Hokage office secretly pulled strings and the sinister Shimura Danzo operated from the shadows, Hiruzen's public image was respectable. To most of Konoha's citizens and even many of its ninja, he was seen as a capable and benevolent leader. But now, that image was about to be torn apart. No one could have ever imagined that such a revered Hokage would face a public interrogation by the legendary divine being, Tsukiyako. Worse still, due to the careful revision of history by Hiruzen and his allies, a younger generation of Konoha's people didn't even know who Tsukiyako was. They only saw a mysterious figure in the sky, whose presence alone was enough to bring the village to its knees. However, the older, more knowledgeable factions knew the truth. The leaders of the great clans, the Yamanaka, Nara, and Akimiki, collectively known as the Inoshikacho, exchanged looks of pure horror. "This is a complete disaster," one clan head muttered, his voice trembling. "It's no exaggeration to say that everything has changed. A conflict with the Uchiha clan would have been an internal problem for Konoha, something we could manage. But if Lord Tsukiyako himself is intervening..." The Inoshikacho clans were the pillars that supported Konoha and the foundation of Hiruzen's power. They, more than anyone, understood the weight of Tsukiyako's name in the shinobi world. He was a being of immense power, an entity that even the two legendary founders of Konoha, Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara, could not defeat. Once a man like that decided to interfere in Konoha's affairs, there was no escape. They knew that all their strategies, schemes, and political maneuvers would be utterly meaningless against him. In fact, Tsukiyako probably wouldn't even need to act himself. His followers, the 12 Divine Moons, possessed enough power to flatten not just Konoha, but the entire Land of Fire. The thought was simply terrifying. "I never expected Lord Tsukiyako to move so quickly," Uchiha Fugaku said, his voice a low rumble. "It seems our actions were not in vain." "That's right," another clan elder agreed. "Now, we just have to wait for the next 3 days to pass. But anything could happen in that time." "Don't worry," Fugaku declared, his eyes sharp. "I've already given the order. Everything that happens in Konoha from this moment on will be broadcast to the entire shinobi world." At that moment, the elites of the Uchiha clan were gathered in their ancestral lands, with their leader, Uchiha Fugaku, at the center. They knew that Tsukiyako was their greatest advantage, but they couldn't rely on him alone. Simply sitting back and waiting for a savior was not the Uchiha way. From the moment Fugaku had united his clan and commanded his younger son, Sasuke, to execute the traitor Itachi, he had already made his decision. He was betting everything on this moment. After his brief encounter with Tsukiyako, Fugaku had reached a bold and dangerous conclusion. The seemingly untouchable divine being was not without ambition. He desired to unify the entire shinobi world. If he didn't, he never would have responded to their plea, even with the divine moon token they presented. A being like Tsukiyako never needed to explain his actions to mortals. He was acting now not because they had convinced him, but because they had given him the perfect justification to intervene. They had handed him the executioner's sword. But there was no point in dwelling on that now. Tsukiyako's methods were beyond their comprehension. The only thing the Uchiha could do was strengthen their clan as much as possible in the short time they had. Only then could they hope to keep pace with Tsukiyako and prove themselves worthy allies, not disposable pawns. This was the Uchiha clan's greatest, and perhaps last, chance to rise again. "Send the order," Fugaku commanded. "We will now form an alliance with the Hyuga clan. They have also suffered under the third Hokage suppression for far too long." As Konoha's factions, the Hokage's office, the great clans, the Hyuga, and the Uchiha, began to move, a different scene was unfolding in a dark alley elsewhere in the village. A man lay crumpled on the ground, his body covered in injuries. He looked up in disbelief at the figure standing over him. "Kakashi Hatake, do you know what you're doing?" Sarutobi Asuma choked out, his voice filled with pain and confusion. The man before him, Kakashi Hatake, showed no emotion on his face as he slowly walked closer. Asuma's mind reeled. He couldn't believe that Kakashi, who had always been fiercely loyal to Konoha and the third Hokage, would betray them. And now, he had turned his blade on him, the Hokage's own son. It looks like the Sarutobi clan's young master is completely in the dark," Kakashi said, his voice chillingly calm. What do you mean?" Asuma's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he was no match for Kakashi. While Asuma was skilled, Kakashi was a true prodigy who had earned his place in the Umbu through sheer talent. With Obito's Sharingan, Kakashi's combat power was on another level entirely. Normally, Asuma could have called for help from the Umbu or other shinobi. But it was impossible. Every person in the village was completely mesmerized by the two mysterious figures in the sky. Even his own father, the third Hokage, was powerless to do anything but watch. Kakashi had chosen the perfect moment to strike. Not long ago, your older brother, Sarutobi Shinosuke, the so-called head of the Hokich's direct umbu, was killed, Kakashi stated coldly, his gaze falling on the pathetic man before him. The one who killed him was my father, Heitake Sakumo, the white fanned, who was cast aside by this corrupt village. What? The word struck Asuma like a bolt of lightning. His face went pale with shock. He had been in such a rush to find his father that he hadn't heard the news about his brother. But more importantly, Heitake Sakumo, he had committed suicide out of guilt years ago. How could he possibly be alive? For a moment, Asuma's world stopped. He could only stare, utterly bewildered and lost. 112, Chapter 112, Extra, A Gift of Blood and Bone. Believe it or not, it's already happening. A cold smile touched Kakashi Heitake's lips as he looked down at Sarutobi Asuma, who was visibly on the verge of collapse. Since your Sarutobi clan decided to target my father, Heitake Sakumo, and has acted so arrogantly in Konoha for so long. Kakashi's voice was like ice. Then there's no longer any reason for any of you to exist. No. In a desperate burst of adrenaline, Asuma scrambled backward, trying to flee. He still had a bright future ahead of him, a life of promise. He was the son of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. He couldn't die here, forgotten in a dark alley. Did you really think you could just walk away from this? Asuma had barely taken 2 steps before Kakashi's figure blurred, reappearing right beside him like a phantom. There was a flash of steel, and a spray of blood erupted into the air. With a sickening sound, both of Asuma's legs were severed at the knee. His body slammed heavily onto the ground. Blood pulsed from the stumps of his limbs, the coppery scent instantly filling the air. An agonizing scream tore from Asuma's throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. As the youngest son of the third Hokage, he had lived a life of privilege, a prince in Konoha. He had never known true suffering, never sustained an injury this severe. And the one who had inflicted it was Kakashi. In the future, when teamed up with Naruto Uzumaki, Kakashi might have seemed more relaxed. But this was the Kakashi who had earned the name Copy Ninja with a single Sharingan and his own terrifying skill. The number of powerful shinobi he had killed on the battlefield was countless. Even now, not yet at his peak, Kakashi's abilities were far beyond what an ordinary ninja could comprehend. Your brother is already gone, Kakashi's voice echoed coldly in the alley. I'll send you to meet him now. A little family reunion. No. Asuma shrieked, his eyes wide with terror. No, I don't want to die. His final plea was cut short. With another swift motion, Kakashi's blade sliced through his neck. Asuma's head flew high into the air before landing on the dusty ground with a soft thud. Dark red blood sprayed across Kakashi's clothes, but his visible eye remained perfectly calm, the only change being a deeper, colder light within it. Meanwhile, high above the village of Konoha, the situation grew more tense. Following the appearance of the 2 members of the 12 Divine Moons, the air had fallen into a profound silence, heavy with dread. From every direction, Konoha's Umbu members swarmed into position, their white masks looking like skulls in the fading light. And then, he appeared. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, the most powerful figure in the village, finally stepped into view, his face etched with grim understanding. Damn it, he thought, his mind racing. Could the Uchiha clan have actually conspired with Tsukiyako? To do that is to hand our greatest enemy a weapon to use against us. Just moments before, he had been meeting with the village elders and Shimura Danzo, plotting how to finally deal with the Uchiha clan. He never expected that the Uchiha, after years of patient endurance, would suddenly make such an explosive move. And they hadn't just acted on their own, they had contacted the most terrifying being in the world, Tsukiyako. The undefeated legend. It was a myth that had haunted the shinobi world for centuries. Even the most seasoned ninja who had grown up hearing the stories could not forget that name. In the era when Tsukiyako walked the earth, everyone else was merely a supporting character in his story. If he had not chosen to remain aloof from the world's politics, the 5 great nations and their ninja villages would never have been formed. Even powerhouses like Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara were helpless before him. Whether anyone was willing to admit it or not, there had only ever been 2 types of people in the shinobi world during that time, Tsukiyako, and everyone else. And now, this living legend had appeared in Konoha, just 3 days after his subordinate Kaguya, to publicly accuse him, the third Hokage. It was the ultimate humiliation, a direct assault on his power and authority in front of the entire world. No matter how cunning or patient Hiruzen was, this was an insult he could not bear. But he also knew the unchangeable truth of the shinobi world: strength was the only thing that mattered. Konoha and the Land of Fire only existed because of the overwhelming power of Hashirama and Madara. The tailed beasts were only distributed among the villages because Hashirama, the strongest of his time, personally proposed it. Absolute strength was the foundation of all authority. Why had he, the god of shinobi, been forced to collude with Danzo to deal with the Uchiha in the shadows? It was the same principle. He simply did not possess the absolute, overwhelming power required to openly destroy one of Konoha's two founding clans. But now, with Tsukioko's intervention, the game had changed. The situation had spiraled completely out of his control. Whether he liked it or not, there was no turning back. "And now, we have a gift for Konoha," one of the black-robed figures in the sky announced, his voice carrying across the silent village. Or more accurately, a gift for Hiruzen Sarutobi. With a flick of his wrist, two large, cloth-wrapped bundles were thrown from the sky, plummeting toward the ground below. "What's going on? What are those things?" a jonin shouted. "I don't know, but it must be another one of Tsukioko's schemes." Another replied. A wave of panic spread through the assembled Konoha forces as they watched the mysterious objects fall. 113, Chapter 113, Extra, A Rival's Delight. Bang! The two bundles burst open in midair. Instead of falling, their contents remained suspended in the sky for a moment, held by some unseen power, forcing everyone below to witness the gruesome display. Two severed heads, their eyes wide and unseeing, stared blankly down at the village. "Oh my God! Is that? It can't be. No, that's impossible. How could this have happened?" A wave of disbelief and horror washed over the assembled Umbu. They were the elite shinobi of Konoha, trained to face death without flinching, but this sight sent a tremor of shock through their ranks. They recognized those faces instantly. It was their commander, Sarutobi Shinosuke, and his wife. Sarutobi Shinosuke was more than just the leader of the Hokage's personal Umbu guard. He was the eldest son of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and the heir to the Sarutobi clan. He was a man known for his strength and for possessing the same cunning as his father. The position he held once belonged to a true hero famous throughout the shinobi world, Heitake Sakumo, the White Fan of Konoha. But years ago, a single failed mission had been twisted and used to drive that hero into the abyss. In the shadows, many whispered that Sarutobi Shinosuke, the man who took Sakumo's place, was the architect of his downfall. The whispers were true. Shinosuke was his father's son in every way. Concepts like honor, the will of fire, and loyalty to the village meant nothing to him. Only power and personal gain mattered. It was this shared philosophy that allowed Hiruzen to tolerate Shimura Danzo's dark ambitions for so long. And it was why Shinosuke, knowing full well that the White Fan was innocent, had shown no mercy in destroying him. But now, in a cruel twist of fate, his own dark deeds had finally come back to claim him. Pfft! Down below, a choked sound escaped the third Hokage's lips. He didn't scream or shout. Instead, a spray of blood erupted from his mouth as he stumbled back, his face draining of all color. In that single, horrific moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi seemed to age decades. The formidable spark in his eyes vanished, leaving only the empty gaze of a broken old man. Why did this happen? An overwhelming sense of powerlessness crushed him. He had two sons. The younger, Asuma, was a good-for-nothing in his eyes, but his eldest, Shinosuke, had shown promise. Of course, much of that promise was built on the power and influence that came with being the Hokage's son, but to Hiruzen, it had been enough. Shinosuke was the heir who could have carried on his legacy, perhaps even becoming Hokage himself one day. And now he was gone. What made the pain even more unbearable was the head of his daughter-in-law beside his son's. He had received secret word just weeks ago: she was pregnant. That was his grandson, the future of his clan. And now, they were all gone. Everything was gone. All of them were dead. So, this is the power of the divine being Tsukioko and his 12 divine moons. Truly extraordinary. Hidden deep beneath Konoha in the dark, sewer-like corridors of the root organization, Shimura Danzo watched the entire scene unfold on his monitors. A cruel smile spread across his bandaged face. As he had always believed, anything that brought misery to Hiruzen Sarutobi brought him twice the joy. If it weren't for that despicable man, the Hokage's hat should have been his. But Hiruzen, with his terrifying cunning, had not only snatched the title away but had also used him for decades. The departure of the Sannin, the quiet extinction of the Senju clan, the current plot to destroy the Uchiha, Hiruzen was connected to it all. Yet, in the eyes of the world, it was always Shimura Danzo who was the villain. Danzo knew the truth. He had carried the blame for years, but simply knowing was not enough. The problem was that Hiruzen's power was too deeply entrenched in Konoha. Even with the strength Danzo had gathered en route, he knew it wasn't enough to overthrow him. Even if he managed to eliminate Hiruzen, the Hokage seat wouldn't necessarily fall to him. And more importantly, Hiruzen still had his sons. While Asuma was a disappointment, Shinashuk was dangerously capable. The man had orchestrated the death of the White Fang, a master shinobi who even the Sannin struggled against. Shinashuk had used shameless, underhanded tactics to push a great hero to his death. But now, that same ruthlessness had come back to haunt him. Ha ha! Your eldest son is dead, and your younger son is worthless, Danzo rasped to the screen, watching Hiruzen's despair with immense satisfaction. Sarutobi, I wonder, what will you do now? As he savored the moment, his eyes caught movement on another monitor, which displayed a live feed from a dark alley in the village. What's this? He leaned closer, his single eye widening in surprise. That's Kakashi Hatake. And Sarutobi Asuma. Danzo knew both men well, but he never imagined they would be in conflict. What he saw next made him freeze. In a flash of movement, Kakashi severed Asuma's limbs and then cleanly decapitated him. Sarutobi Asuma, dead. In a single night, both of Hiruzen Sarutobi's sons, the capable Shinashuk and the disappointing Asuma, had been eliminated. The cunning Shimura Danzo shot up from his chair, a strange, cracking sound coming from his throat. He had suppressed his hatred for so long that he had almost forgotten how to smile. A low chuckle escaped his lips, then another, building into a roaring, unhinged laugh that echoed through the darkness of his underground base. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. Oh, Sarutobi, to lose your sons in your old age. What a joyous, joyous occasion. In that moment, Danzo felt like he had finally, truly won. 114, Chapter 114, Extra, A Shattered Legacy. High above Konoha, the two black-robed figures watched the chaos unfold, their eyes sharp and unblinking. One of them, hidden behind a mask, was Hatake Sakumo. This village was the place he had been born, the home he had once fought to protect. But that was a lifetime ago. Ever since the incident that branded him a traitor, the love he held for Konoha had turned to ash. He had remained in the shadows for years, restrained by the will of his master, Tsukiyako. But now, his master had chosen to intervene personally. The time for restraint was over. Throughout the history of the shinobi world, many had dared to oppose Tsukiyako. Very few had lived to tell the tale. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the so-called god of shinobi, didn't even have the right to stand in his master's presence. It seems you're pleased with your gift, third Hokage, Hatake Sakumo's voice, distorted by his mask, echoed from the sky. With a flick of his wrist, he sent the severed heads of Sarutobi Shinashuk and his wife hurtling through the air. Their target was not the ground, but the great stone monument carved into the mountain overlooking the village. Oh no! That's the Hokage Rock. It's the most sacred place in our village. Damn it, what are they trying to do? The shinobi below watched in horror as the two heads slammed into the monument. They struck the carved face of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, a symbol of an era that had spanned decades, an era of cunning, compromise, and quiet oppression that had kept Konoha at the forefront of the shinobi world. The monument also bore the faces of his predecessors, the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, the second Hokage Tobirama Senju, and his successor, the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze. It was the face of Konoha's pride and strength. Boom, boom, boom. The heads exploded with unimaginable force. The terrifying impact sent a deafening roar across the village. The stone face of Hiruzen Sarutobi cracked, splintered, and then shattered completely. Countless tons of rock rained down from the mountain, and the entire village was plunged into a shocked, stunned silence. No, no, why? Hiruzen whispered, his voice trembling. The sight before him made his world spin. Why is it like this? He had given his life to Konoha. He had worked tirelessly, schemed endlessly, and sacrificed everything to maintain its power and influence. The Hokage Rock was the symbol of his glory, his legacy carved in stone for all time. And now, with one terrifying explosion, it had all been turned to dust. My God, this is terrifying. The 12 divine moons did this, but it's the will of Lord Tsukiyako. They say his power is absolute. He's a forbidden legend in the shinobi world, an invincible being. Throughout Konoha, the leaders of the great clans watched, completely stunned. They knew that ever since Hiruzen had taken power, the direction of the village had shifted. The two founding clans, the Senju and the Uchiha, had been sidelined and suppressed by his iron-fisted, behind-the-scenes rule. Other clans, seeing his immense political power, had no choice but to compromise and fall in line. But compromise did not mean acceptance. Their resentment toward Hiruzen's rule had been growing for years, accumulating day by day like a gathering storm. And now, watching his monument crumble, that storm had finally reached its peak. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the voices of the two figures boomed from the sky one last time. Remember this. In 3 days, Lord Tsukiyako will hold you accountable. Don't even think about running. There isn't a corner of this world you can hide in. As they spoke, a brilliant light enveloped them. A surging wave of energy washed over the sky, and an immense, suffocating pressure fell upon the entire village. The next moment, they were gone. It wasn't until their presence had completely vanished that the shinobi of Konoha finally dared to breathe again. A collective sigh of relief was quickly replaced by a new, creeping dread. They had to admit, the power radiating from those two figures was overwhelming. And yet, they were merely subordinates, members of the 12 divine moons under Tsukiyako. If they were this powerful, how strong were the others? How powerful was Tsukiyako himself? If that legendary being were to descend upon Konoha, then even the full might of the Land of Fire, perhaps even the entire shinobi world, would be crushed as easily as an ant. They're finally gone. But only for now. In 3 days, they'll be back. And Lord Tsukiyako himself will likely be with them. Within the compounds of the Inoshikacho, the Hyaga, and the Uchiha, a grim realization set in. They could feel it in their bones, a revolution was coming. The era of Hiruzen Sarutobi and his will of fire was about to be shattered. With the fall of the Hokage's office, Konoha would be forced into a new and uncertain era. The question now was how their clans would survive it. They had already been swept up in the tide of history. They no longer had the luxury of choosing a side. At a time like this, there was only one thing they could do: follow the strongest. It was their only choice. 115, Chapter 115 Frowny Face Extra, No Allies, No Heirs. As the oppressive aura of the two dark figures lifted, a collective sigh of relief passed through the streets of Konoha. But for the village's powerful ninja clans and its ruling council, the brief respite brought no comfort. They understood that everything they had just witnessed, the gruesome gifts, the destruction of the Hokage Rock, was merely an appetizer. In 3 days, the true, terrifying power of the divine being Tsukiyako would descend upon them. This was no longer a village matter. A being with the strength to crush the entire shinobi world by himself was now in motion. Whatever he chose to do, no one would be able to stop him, and the coming days would surely plunge the 5 great nations into an unprecedented storm of violence. Soon after, within the Hokage building, 4 figures gathered around the large conference table in the Hokage's office. It was the village's leadership council: Hiruzen Sarutobi, Shimura Danzo, Kohara Yudatan, and Homura Mitokada. They had once been united in their goals, but now, with their futures on the line, fractures were beginning to show. As the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi was the one feeling the most pressure. "We all shared in the spoils of our decisions for years," Hiruzen began, his voice laced with a cold fury. "Now, it's time for all of us to share the cost." The moment he had seen his eldest son's severed head, something inside him had shattered. All that remained was a burning hatred for Tsukiyako and his 12 divine moons. He feared their power, of course. He knew better than anyone that if Tsukiyako truly wanted to take control of Konoha, no one in the Land of Fire, let alone the shinobi world, would have the courage or ability to object. But Hiruzen had been Hokage for most of his life. He had held the power of life and death, controlling every aspect of the village from the shadows. To suddenly lose everything he had built was a fate he could not accept. It was a thought more unbearable than death itself. "That may be," Shimura Danzo said, his voice a low rasp, "but even if every clan in Konoha united, we would still be no match for Tsukiyako. You know this, Sarutobi. As our Hokage, you must consider what is best for the village. Sometimes, at critical moments, a leader must be prepared to make a sacrifice." Koharu and Homura immediately sided with Danzo. He's right, Hiruzen, Koharu said coolly. You are the Hokage. It is your clan that holds the most power in Konoha. While our families have benefited over the years, it is nothing compared to what the Sarutobi clan has gained. More importantly, Homura added, Tsukiyako has made it clear that you are his target. This is a storm that you have drawn to our village. Their words were carefully chosen, but the meaning was unmistakable. They were cutting him loose. Crack. Hiruzen slammed his fist on the table, the heavy wood splitting and shattering under the force of the blow. His face was a twisted mask of rage. Ha! Don't be fools. We did this together. Do you truly believe Tsukiyako is only targeting me? 3 days from now, when he descends on this village, none of you will escape his judgment. His voice dropped to a low, chilling growl. And one of those two figures from before. I recognized him. There was a familiar feeling about him. I believe it was the man who was said to have committed suicide, the White Fang of Konoha, Heitake Sakumo. What? The revelation sent a shockwave through the room. The faces of Danzo, Koharu, and Homura went pale. Heitake Sakumo was dead. But they also knew that with a being as powerful as Tsukiyako, the impossible became possible. If he possessed a unique method of resurrection, then the return of the White Fang was entirely plausible. That is why he killed my son, Hiruzen seethed, the words dripping with venom. This is a debt that I will remember. He conveniently ignored the fact that he had allowed his son, Shinashuk, to orchestrate Sakumo's downfall in the first place. Now, faced with retaliation, he felt nothing but a thirst for vengeance, a perfect display of his extreme double standard. As of now, we must strengthen Konoha's defenses, Danzo said, breaking the tense silence. The former Sannin, Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade must be recalled to the village at once. Furthermore, we need to open communications with the other great ninja villages. Tsukiyako is a threat to us all. He is a common enemy. When a single person possessed the power to crush everything, everyone else became an ant in their eyes. The only way for the ants to survive was to unite. It sounds simple, but it won't be easy, Hiruzen said, waving his hand dismissively. Begin immediately. Danzo and the other two elders flickered out of the room. The moment they were gone, another figure appeared, kneeling before the Hokage's desk. It was an Umbu operative. Reporting, Lord Third, the ninja said, his voice flat and emotionless. He held up a cloth-wrapped bundle. Your son, Sarutobi Asuma, has been killed. The Umbu unfurled the cloth, revealing Asuma's severed head. The assassin was Kakashi Heitake. According to our intelligence, he cut a path through the Sarutobi clan compound before disappearing from the village. Pfft! The word struck Hiruzen like a physical blow. Another mouthful of blood sprayed from his lips, and the last of his strength left him. He collapsed into his chair, a broken man who had lost both his sons and his entire legacy in the span of a single night. 116, Chapter 116, Extra, The Tremors of a God's Return. The Infinite Kingdom. With a low, humming sound, two figures in black robes tore through the void. Like phantoms, they appeared instantly within a strange dimension. This was the same place the Uchiha clan had once trespassed. Before them, a massive platform slowly began to rise from the ground. Atop the platform sat a throne that seemed forged from blood and fire. And seated upon that throne was their master, Shenron Yuyen. Greetings, Lord Tsukiyako. Greetings, Lord Tsukiyako. The two black-robed figures immediately dropped to one knee, showing their deep respect. They remained kneeling until Yuyen gave a slight nod, permitting them to stand. Even as they rose, their gazes were filled with awe and solemn reverence. Their master's abilities were completely beyond their comprehension. He had the power to resurrect the dead, like themselves, and grant them strength even greater than what they had in life. The mission was executed perfectly. Yuyen slowly stood up from his throne, a faint smile on his face. Now, the news of what happened in Konoha will surely spread throughout the entire shinobi world. Soon, everyone will know that I, Tsukiyako, have returned. This world is filled with constant war and injustice, but all of that is about to come to a complete end. For Tsukiyako, simply destroying the shinobi world would have been an easy task. The real challenge was reshaping it to develop according to his will, a far more complex process. More importantly, he did not want a repeat of what had occurred in the Demon Slayer world. This time, he intended not only to take complete control of the Naruto world but to refine it into a realm that was his and his alone. To accomplish such a goal, he needed the right opportunity to make his move. The actions of the third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, in Konoha had created the conflicts that drove the main story of this world. The Uchiha clan's annihilation, in particular, was a critical event that connected both the visible and hidden plot lines of the entire narrative. However, with Shenron Yuien's intervention, the story they knew as Shippuden would never come to pass. It was now uncertain if Naruto Uzumaki would even live to see his teenage years as he did in the original timeline. "First, I think I'll go collect the so-called tailed beasts," Tsukiyako said, that smile reappearing on his face. After all, the Akatsuki have been working so hard for so long. It's time to reap the rewards of their labor. Hearing this, the two black-robed figures, Hanzo the Salamander and Heitake Sakumo, were both visibly startled. They knew that the Akatsuki had been operating mysteriously from the shadows of Omegakure for years. In fact, Hanzo himself had been killed during a confrontation with them. But then again, it didn't matter how powerful the members of Akatsuki were. In front of a being like Shenron Yuien, they were as fragile as paper, ready to be torn apart with a simple flick of a finger. At the same time, news of the 12 divine moons appearing in Konoha and Shenron Yuien's impending judgment of Hiruzen Sarutobi spread like wildfire across the shinobi world. Oh my god, are the rumors true? Is it really Shenron Yuien? Why is this happening now? His power is supposed to be unimaginable. Has he truly decided to emerge from the shadows? There's no question about it. No one can underestimate his dominance. Hiruzen Sarutobi is finished this time. In a very short period, the entire shinobi world was thrown into a state of shock. The 5 great nations and their respective ninja villages were all reeling from the news. Shenron Yuien, a name from myths, a figure of legend. And now, he was about to reappear. Even though Yuien hadn't shown himself personally, the power displayed by his 12 divine moons alone was terrifying. It was a level of strength that no one dared to imagine facing. More importantly, Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves, was one of the most formidable powers in the entire shinobi world. But even a village that strong would be utterly helpless if it had to face Shenron Yuien. Land of Water, Kirigakure. Inside the Mizukage's office, Yagura Karatake, the man who was supposedly the 4th Mizukage, sat silently. In reality, he was merely a puppet being controlled by Obito Uchiha. Obito had only managed to gain control over Yagura thanks to the schemes of Madara Uchiha before his death. After striking a deal with Obito, Madara had finally passed away, leaving Obito in charge of the Land of Water. So, the legend is true. Shenron Yuien is actually appearing now. Hiding in the shadows, Obito's visible eye held a sharp, determined glint. It doesn't matter. No one is going to stop me. I will create a world where only Rin no Era exists. As a member of the stubborn Uchiha clan, Obito's obsession with his goal was absolute and profound. Land of Wind, Tsunagakure. Inside the Kazekage's office, a sinister figure watched the events unfold. Heh, things have certainly become very interesting. It seems my old teacher, Hiruzen, has found himself in quite a bit of trouble. Although Tsunagakure was one of the 5 great ninja villages, its Kazekage had already been secretly assassinated and replaced by Orochimaru, who was now using his identity as a puppet. In the original timeline, Orochimaru used this very disguise to successfully ambush his former sensei. However, with the arrival of Shenron Yuien, everything was now changing in ways no one could have predicted. Land of Earth, Iwagakure. In the Tsuchikage's office, Oniki felt as if he were sitting on pins and needles. He had lived through the era of legends like Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara, men whose power was terrifying and made him feel deep fear. But the name, Shenron Yuien, was something else entirely. In Oniki's eyes, it was like a god descending from the heavens to walk among mortals. He knew that all of his ninjutsu, his methods, and even his prized Kekkai Genkai would be like worthless trash before such a being, unable to withstand a single blow. Yuien's intervention meant that the entire shinobi world was on the verge of a terrifying and unimaginable upheaval. 117, Chapter 117, Extra, A Legend's Shadow. As one of the Kage leading a great ninja village, the Tsuchikage, Oniki, possessed incredible personal strength. But even a man of his stature had things he feared, beings he would never dare to fight. Among them were legends who had once shaken the shinobi world to its core, like the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, and the man known as the Ghost of the Uchiha, Madara Uchiha. However, if someone were to ask who he feared the most, the one person he would never face under any circumstances, the answer would be that terrifying, untouchable figure, Shenren Yuan. He was a man with no equal in the history of the shinobi world. Ona-ki remembered how Yuan had effortlessly crushed an ambush led by both Senju Hashirama and other top shinobi. All of their strongest techniques, Hashiramas would release, the Uchiha's Mangekyo Sharingan, even tailed beast bombs, had been completely useless against him. They were no match for him. Thinking back on that record, Ona-ki was certain that no one could ever compare to Shenren Yuan. If he hadn't suddenly vanished at the height of his power, the world wouldn't be divided into the 5 great nations today. A man like Yuan would have only one goal: to forge a single, centralized empire. In that empire, all the existing nations and ninja villages would be nothing more than territories under his rule. Ona-ki had long believed that such a figure had disappeared from history forever, but he never imagined he would reappear now. And while Yuan himself hadn't appeared, the arrival of his 12 divine moons was essentially the same thing. Truly powerful leaders rarely handled everything themselves. Having powerful subordinates was only natural. In that bygone era, countless shinobi dreamed of becoming one of the 12 divine moons. It meant gaining virtual immortality and an unimaginable boost in power, a temptation that almost no one could resist. But, based on the reports, this is supposed to be a time of intense conflict between Hiruzen Sarutobi and the Uchiha clan in Konoha, Ona-ki muttered to himself. An incredibly bold and terrifying idea suddenly formed in his mind. Could it be? Did the Uchiha somehow bring Shenren Yuan back? Meanwhile, in the land of lightning, Kimagakure. Inside the Raikage's office, the 4th Raikage, who normally saw himself as invincible, wore a grim expression. Others might not understand the gravity of the situation, but as an experienced Kage, he knew better than anyone just how terrifying Shenren Yuan truly was. The Raikage's own abilities were top class, even among his fellow Kage. But that meant little when the man in question had killed countless Kage-level experts in his time. Even figures like Hashirama and Madara, who were considered the pinnacle of power, were nothing in front of him. On the surface, Yuan's return seemed to be triggered by the actions of Konoha's 3rd Hokage. But leaders like Raikage knew that when a person like Yuan made a move, it would cause a cataclysm that would shake the entire world. His reappearance would surely bring drastic changes to the shinobi world. More importantly, the strongest of the tailed beasts, the 9-tailed demon fox, was currently sealed within Konoha. If Yuan's deeper goal was to collect the 9 tails, then the other tailed beasts wouldn't be safe either. The 8 tails was fused with his younger brother, Killer Bee. This meant that their village, Kimagakure, would likely have to face Shenren Yuan soon. It was the worst possible scenario. If it were anyone else, even the Hokage himself, Raikage wouldn't have hesitated. But why did it have to be Shenren Yuan? The only small piece of good news was that Yuan had declared he would only act against Sarutobi in 3 days. But that wasn't good news at all, it was terrible news. No one knew what a being like that would do in those 3 days, or who he might target next. The Raikage was almost certain that Kimagakure's Jinchuriki, his brother Killer Bee, was on Yuan's list. So, what was he supposed to do? What stance could Kimagakure possibly take? Did they really have the courage to stand against Shenren Yuan? At the same time, Umbu ninja dispatched from the Hokage's office in Konoha were trying to contact the legendary Sannin. The Sannin were 3 powerful shinobi, all students of the 3rd Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. They were Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade. While Jiraiya and Orochimaru came from common backgrounds, Tsunade was a descendant of the legendary Senju clan. But all 3 had one thing in common: they had long since left Konoha, each for their own reasons. Tsunade left because she grew disgusted with the darkness she saw in Hiruzen's leadership. Orochimaru's departure was officially because of his forbidden human experiments, but the real reason was that his ambition threatened the rise of the next Hokage candidate, Minato Namikaze. Naturally, such an ugly political matter couldn't be pinned on a hero like Minato, so Hiruzen and Danzo played their parts to force him out. Jiraiya left simply because he realized the Konoha he was in was no longer the village he once knew. He made his own mess, so he can clean it up himself. The Konoha Umbu delivered his message. Tsunade, sitting with a cup of sake in a noisy tavern, just scoffed. He's the Hokage, after all. It was clear that the life or death of her former teacher meant nothing to her anymore. However, When the Umbu mentioned the incredibly familiar name, Shenren Yueyen, a strange feeling stirred in Tsunade's heart. Every woman was young once, and in her youth, every girl has a dream lover. And as it happened, Tsunade's dream lover from her younger days was none other than Shenren Yueyen. 118, Chapter 118, Extra, The Price of a God. Every young girl has dreams of romance. Tsunade was no different. She was born when the Senju clan was at its peak, a time when both Senju Hashirama and Senju Tobirama were in their prime. But even above them, above the entire shinobi world, there was always one being who stood apart from everyone else. That person was Shenren Yueyen. In his presence, even the most powerful clans like the Senju and the Uchiha knew to show deference. For a young Tsunade, who already saw her grandfather, the god of shinobi, as the greatest hero, the existence of someone even more powerful was fascinating. This man, Yueyen, naturally captured her attention and interest. As Tsunade grew older, the legends of Shenren Yueyen began to fade from the shinobi world, but his importance in her heart only grew. It was a matter of comparison. The world had once produced incredible heroes during its chaotic wars, but as peace settled in, the 5 great nations and their villages stabilized. In an era of peace, it was exponentially harder for anyone to make a name for themselves. Only a few, like Kakashi Hatake with his Sharingan and his clan's sword techniques, managed to stand out. Most others were simply not impressive. Tsunade knew her own strength, and few people could ever earn her respect. Over the past several years, she had watched as Hiruzen Sarutobi and his advisors stirred up trouble, turning Konoha into a mess of political intrigue and corruption. This left her completely disappointed with the village and, in a strange way, made her feel an even greater admiration for the legendary figure of Shenren Yueyen. The only thing she regretted was that in all these years, she had never once seen his face. If this so-called catastrophe in Konoha gave her a chance to finally see the real Shenren Yueyen, then maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. As for Hiruzen's summons for help, to Tsunade, it was less than worthless. Besides Tsunade, the other 2 legendary Sannin, Jiraiya and Orochimaru, both made the decision to return to Konoha. However, their reasons were entirely different. Jiraiya, despite his travels, was still a Konoha shinobi. He had no deep-seated conflict with Hiruzen or the Land of Fire. His absence had been a form of self-exile. Now that his village and his former teacher were in grave danger, it was only natural for him to return and offer his help. It was his duty. But Orochimaru was a different story. His departure from Konoha had been ugly. The official story was that he was cast out for his forbidden human experiments, but the truth was that Hiruzen had tacitly approved of those experiments, which were often conducted with Danzo Shimura. When the situation was exposed, Orochimaru was pushed forward to take all the blame. He became the scapegoat, a sacrifice to protect the village's leadership. On the surface, it seemed he had been corrupted, but in reality, he was just a tool they used and discarded. More importantly, this happened at a critical time when the next Hokage was being chosen, and Orochimaru permanently lost his chance at the title. Although he later founded his own village and even manipulated his way into becoming the Kage of another, the throne of Hokage in Konoha was the prize he had always truly wanted. Therefore, his decision to return now was a terrifying mystery. No one could possibly guess the true, dark intentions hidden within his heart. At that moment, in Konoha, the village hidden in the leaves. Inside the Hokage's office, a new conference table had been set up. Seated around it were the 4 people who held the most power in the village. Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo Shimura, Koharu Yudatan, Homura Mitokado. The pride they usually carried was gone. Today, they all looked worried, their faces grim and pale. It was as if they had aged decades in just a few days. I never expected it, Hiruzen began, his voice heavy. In such a short time, our problems in Konoha have become the talk of the entire shinobi world. For years, we've used every method we could to erase Shenren Yueyen's influence, but you can't erase deeds of that scale. His power is terrifying. It's like staring up at the stars in the night sky. All you can do is look up in awe and feel helpless. Despite the anger and fear he felt, Hiruzen remained surprisingly calm. We don't have much time. The good news is that Jiraiya and Orochimaru have agreed to return. Tsunade, however, has not. As soon as he said the name, Orochimaru, the room fell into a dead silence. Danzo's expression, in particular, turned incredibly dark. Hiruzen had personally forced Orochimaru out of the village years ago. How could he be shameless enough to ask for his help now? Danzo had been in secret contact with Orochimaru for years, and he knew that Orochimaru's desire to kill Hiruzen had never faded. Could it be? Danzo thought. Is Orochimaru returning just to use this chaos to fulfill his own ambitions? If that was the case, then perhaps Danzo himself could play the role of the Oriole that waits for the mantis and cicada. He could become the final winner. There is one more thing we can do, Hiruzen said, his gaze sweeping over the other three. Our families are all tied together in this. We will prosper or perish together. We've all gathered a great deal of wealth over the years. Now, at this critical moment, we can use it. We will offer a bounty to every mercenary and bounty hunter in the shinobi world. A cold, desperate smile touched his lips. As the saying goes, a heavy reward will draw brave men. Shenron Yuan is terrifying, and he has his 12 divine moons, but in the end, he is still just one person. And if a person is killed, he will die. Hiruzen's face twisted into a mask of vengeance. Our 4 great families will offer a bounty of 100 billion ryo. The mission is simple, slay Shenron Yuan. Danzo, Koharu, and Homura stared at him, their eyes wide with fear and shock. They never expected Hiruzen to propose such an astonishing, reckless plan. But was this a brilliant strategy to use against a god, or was it just the final, desperate frenzy before their complete destruction? They were too deeply connected to Hiruzen to back out now. If he fell, their 4 families would inevitably crumble with him, and everything they had built would be destroyed in an instant. 119, Chapter 119, Extra, The Uproar of 100 Billion. Hiruzen Sarutobi was an old fox. He knew exactly how terrifying Shenron Yuan's reputation and strength were in the shinobi world. But knowing that didn't change his situation. Even with the truth staring him in the face, he couldn't just sit back and wait to die. He had his youngest son, Asuma Sarutobi, and the entire Sarutobi clan to think about. Ever since the Senju clan had been divided and weakened, the balance of power in Konoha had shifted. Over the years, under Hiruzen's wise leadership, the Sarutobi clan had grown rapidly, becoming one of the most influential families in the village. He had carefully protected their development, using figures like Danzo Shimura as scapegoats to keep his own hands clean. Everything had been under his control. He never dreamed that the Uchiha clan, a problem he thought he could easily eliminate, would cause such chaos at this critical moment. And the most unimaginable thing they did was bring back a legendary figure like Shenron Yuan. Now, Hiruzen had no choice. He had to stand and fight, even if he hated it. Otherwise, the Sarutobi clan, Konoha, and perhaps the entire Land of Fire would be completely annihilated. People often said that Senju Hashirama and Uchiha Madara ended the chaotic era of warring states, but the truth was, it was all the work of Shenron Yuan. Hiruzen knew his resistance might be futile, but he couldn't just give up and accept his fate. Soon, the bounty issued by Konoha's 4 great families sent a massive shockwave throughout the shinobi world. From the 5 great nations to the smallest hidden villages, everyone was talking about it. A bounty of 100 billion ryo. Such an enormous sum was an overpayment even for the assassination of a daimyo or a Kage-level shinobi. Eager bounty hunters and mercenaries were already sharpening their blades, but when they saw the target's name, they all froze. The mission was to kill a man named Tsukiyako. What's going on? Who is this Tsukiyako? The Konoha higher-ups issued this bounty publicly. This is huge. You must not have heard what happened in Konoha. It was a big deal. It's more than a big deal. This Tsukiyako, he's the same person as Shenron Yuan, the legend everyone used to worship like a god. The news exploded across the shinobi world. Countless experts and bounty hunters were thrown into an uproar. Whether they wanted to believe it or not, they had to accept that Shenron Yuan was a figure unlike any other. Most shinobi only knew of famous ninja like Uchiha Madara or the Senju brothers. But even if you added all of those legends together, trying to kill Shenron Yuan was as impossible as trying to climb to the heavens. It had been tried before, not just once, but many times. Yuan's way of doing things inevitably brought him into conflict with Hashirama and the others. It was a fated battle. But even with Hashirama's immense power, Madara's Mangekyo Sharingan, and countless other elite ninja fighting alongside them, it was useless. Yuan didn't even need to use any powerful techniques to completely dominate them. His terrifying strength shocked the entire shinobi world, and his name became a taboo. As times changed and the 5 great nations were established, traces of Shenren Yuan gradually disappeared. But his reappearance now meant that an unprecedented storm was about to sweep across the land. And the first person in its path was Hiruzen Sarutobi. The land of rain, a megakur. Heh, a big job has finally come our way. But this one looks pretty tricky, even for us. Shenren Yuan. I wonder how a legend like that would hold up against the Rinnegan. The Akatsuki, originally founded by Madara and later controlled by Obito, had slowly formed its core members under the leadership of Nagato Uzumaki. While many of its future famous members had yet to join, the group was already impressive. The 100 billion Ryo bounty from Konoha was enough to tempt even a group like them. They were all young and hadn't lived through Yuan's era, but they knew their opponent was no simple foe. However, to Nagato, who possessed the legendary Rinnegan, none of that mattered. In his eyes, the Rinnegan made him the chosen one of this era. He was the child of destiny. His very existence was meant to change the world. Every word he spoke and every action he took was meant to shape the future. Now that a so-called prodigy from the past had reappeared, Nagato believed it was his destiny to strike him down. The opponent may have been called a divine being, but Nagato believed he himself was a true god in every sense of the word. He was the god of the new era, the border of the land of lightning. While the rest of the world was in turmoil, a patrol of Kimagakur ninja moved along the border. Everyone, stay alert. Things have been tense lately, a capable female voice ordered. The surrounding ninja immediately nodded in respect. The woman leading them was Yujito Ni. She was not only one of Kimagakur's 2 Jinchuriki but also a highly respected kunoichi who had contributed greatly to the village's strength. Lady Yujito, have you also heard the news? An older ninja asked from beside her. What news? Yujito replied, though her heart skipped a beat. A sense of unease washed over her. Never mind that. Everyone, finish your patrols. That's the most important thing right now. Yes, ma'am. They all replied. Buzz, buzz. Before anyone could move, the air just a short distance away began to ripple and distort. A terrifying, violent roar echoed through the heavens and the earth. Then, from out of nowhere, a throne woven from what looked like blood and fire materialized in the sky. And upon that throne sat the figure of an impossibly handsome man. 120, Chapter 120, Extra, An Effortless Hunt. The moment the throne of blood and fire appeared in the sky, a destructive aura washed over the landscape. In an instant, the patrol ninjas accompanying Yujito Ni simply ceased to exist. They didn't even have time to scream before their bodies disintegrated into dust, crushed into nothing by the overwhelming pressure. No, that's impossible. The sight sent a jolt of pure fury through Yujito. The fact that this intruder had so brazenly invaded the land of lightning and murdered her comrades pushed her anger to its absolute limit. However, the terrifying, soul-crushing power radiating from the sky forced her mind back to a state of cold, sharp clarity. This was no ordinary person. His appearance here was no accident. Could it be, this person is? As Yujito trembled, the figure on the throne solidified. An impossibly handsome face, like that of a divine being, looked down upon her. The moment his features became clear, the very air seemed to grow heavy, surging with a violent energy that pressed in from all directions. I can't hold on. A wave of heat rolled through Yujito's body as her own power began to boil under the immense pressure. As a Jinchuriki, she contained the terrifying power of a tailed beast. These beings, even the weakest among them, could unleash devastation on a massive scale. When fused with a skilled ninja, that power became even more destructive, creating a living weapon of immense power, completely loyal to its village. But in all her time as a Jinchuriki, Yujito had never encountered a presence this powerful. It was a pressure so immense that it felt like it could extinguish her and the beast within her without a second thought. Matadabi, who is he? She desperately asked, the consciousness of the two-tailed cat sealed within her. Though Matadabi was sealed, the two existed in a symbiotic state. Their relationship was harmonious, allowing Yujito to draw out the tailed beast's incredible strength. This, it can't be, is that him? The legend, the invincible one. Yujito's blood ran cold. She had never heard Matadabi, a being of pure power and arrogance, speak with such trembling fear. The presence in the sky was so terrifying that it could affect the mind of a tailed beast. It was clear that even a creature as mighty as the Two Tails was completely and utterly terrified. Who is he? Yujito whispered, a terrible feeling sinking into her heart. At the same time, High above on his throne, a calm smile appeared on Tsukiyoko's face. It seems the information was accurate, he thought to himself. The Two Tails Jinchuriki is here. That means the 8 tails should be in the Kumare Gorge, just as expected. Allowing the Uchiha clan to summon him was merely a bit of theater to build momentum for his return. If he truly wanted to reappear, he could have done so in countless other ways. However, Tsukiyoko enjoyed using his knowledge of this world's main storyline to his advantage. It often led to unexpected and efficient results. The tailed beasts were critical pieces on the board. Their power was woven through the entire history of the shinobi world, from the 9 tails sealed within the protagonist, Naruto Uzumaki, to the Uchiha clan's Sharingan, which held the power to control them. Collecting all 9 tailed beasts was the fastest way to advance his grander plans. The Sharingan, and especially the Mangekyo Sharingan, he mused, his eyes fixed on the woman below. Its effect on the tailed beasts is undeniable. He watched Yujito's expression shift from anger to dawning horror. Tsukiyoko's smile widened. The next moment, he extended his arm forward and opened his hand, spreading his 5 fingers wide. Instantly, countless intricate patterns began to spread across his palm like a growing web. Not good. The sight plunged Yujito into absolute shock. Through Matadabi's panicked consciousness, she had finally guessed the identity of the man before her. Shenron Yueyen, the master of the 12 divine moons. A legendary figure who had once brought the entire shinobi world to its knees. He had vanished for years, but his legend never died. He was an undefeated warrior who even the god of shinobi, Senju Hashirama, could not match. Against such a being, unleashing the full power of the Two Tails would be like throwing an egg against a mountain. But even if she wanted to run, she knew her opponent would never give her the chance. Damn it, what is that? Yujito's gaze was involuntarily drawn to Tsukiyoko's open palm. The patterns spreading from it now resembled the roots of a great tree, covering the sky and casting a shadow over everything. The dense, web-like energy enveloped her completely. Then, from the center of that palm, a sharp and eerie eye suddenly opened. Its tomo spun wildly, a crimson will that seemed capable of crushing fate itself. It was the Uchiha clan's ultimate power, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Yujito, a Jinchuriki with the power to destroy entire cities, never even got the chance to attack. In a single moment, she was completely suppressed. As her consciousness began to fade, a calm, majestic voice echoed across the sky, sealing her fate. Two Tails, captured. 121, Chapter 121, Extra, The Fall of the Two Tails. The air went silent for a moment, a deep stillness that felt heavy and unnatural. Then, the world erupted in light. The 2 glowing orbs of energy that had been merged just moments before were torn apart. A sharp, piercing scream echoed from one of them. They say all things have a spirit, Tsukiyoko's calm voice cut through the air. But unfortunately for you, the spirit of a tailed beast is nothing more than a source of power. As he spoke, one of the light clusters flickered violently. It was already unable to hold its form and began to dissipate into nothing. The remaining cluster of light trembled, watching the life it had been bound to for so long simply vanish. Their shared existence as a Jinchuriki was over. The soul of the ninja, now separated from its physical body, was heading towards complete annihilation. Now then, Tsukiyoko said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. I'll be taking the power of the Two Tails. His palm seemed to vibrate with a low hum. The last remaining light cluster, the spirit of the tailed beast Matadabi, was pulled forward. It transformed into a brilliant ray of light and was instantly swallowed by his hand, leaving no trace behind. The tailed beasts were a unique form of power, exclusive to the shinobi world. It was said that by gathering all 9 of them, one could activate the infinite Tsukuyomi. Of course, the so-called infinite Tsukuyomi was just a genjutsu, a powerful illusion cast on a global scale. It was the peaceful world that Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito had dreamed of creating. It was a shame, Tsukiyoko thought, that a powerful man like Madara could be so foolish. He had dedicated his life to a prophecy that had been secretly altered by Black Zetsu. All of his planning and all of his sacrifices were never for his own goal. In the end, it was all for the sake of reviving Kagaya at Satsuki. But none of that mattered to Tsukiyoko. He had no interest in creating some perfect world for the shinobi. His only goal was to increase his own strength, and to do that, he needed to evolve beyond all limits. In this world created by Masashi Kishimoto, talent meant nothing compared to one's lineage. The power of a bloodline was everything. Tsukiyako couldn't be reincarnated like the sons of the Sage of Six Paths, but the unique physique he possessed from Kibutsuji Muzan gave him another path to ultimate power, the ability to devour. Over the years, Tsukiyako had consumed countless unique bloodlines throughout the shinobi world. He had taken Kekkei Genkai and even the legendary Kekkei Mora for himself. He had devoured everything this world had to offer, building an arsenal of abilities that made him nearly unbeatable. It was because of this that even a prodigy like Uchiha Itachi, who had awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, stood no chance against him. It wasn't that Itachi was weak, it was that Tsukiyako's power had become almost absolute. However, the power of bloodlines alone was not enough. The tailed beasts were different. They were beings of pure chakra, born from the spiritual energy of the world itself. They were practically immortal. You could defeat their physical forms, but their energy would simply gather again over time, and they would be reborn. When they returned, however, they would have no memory of their past lives. Since the two tails is now in my hands, Tsukiyako mused to himself, I suppose my next stop should be the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails. With that single thought, his figure vanished from the sky, leaving only silence behind. At that exact moment, in the Reikage's office in the hidden cloud village, chaos was breaking out. This is terrible. Several Umbu shinobi appeared in a flash, their faces pale with shock. They dropped to one knee before the desk. Lord Reikage, we have an emergency. One of them stammered. We just received word. Lady Yujito Ni's life signature has completely disappeared. The fourth Reikage, slammed his massive fists on his desk, his face instantly twisting into a grimace of horror and rage. What? How is that possible? He roared. Yujito Ni was one of the most elite ninja in the hidden cloud. She was a jonin of incredible skill and experience. More importantly, she was the Jinchuriki of the two-tailed beast, Matatabi. She and his younger brother, Killer Bee, were the pride of the village, two perfect Jinchuriki who could fully control the power of their tailed beasts. When Yujito entered her tailed beast form, her power was terrifying. And yet, she had been defeated and killed in such a short amount of time. Who could have done this? The Reikage's mind raced. Then, a dreadful possibility struck him, and his expression changed from anger to pure dread. Quickly, gather everyone and follow me to the Valley of Clouds and Lightning. He commanded. In the entire shinobi world, there was only one person capable of killing Yujito so easily. Shenron Yueyen. The Reikage now understood. This monster wasn't just targeting Yujito as a powerful ninja. His true goal was the tailed beast she carried inside her. The hidden cloud had two Jinchuriki, which meant it had two tailed beasts. With Yujito gone, only one remained, his brother, Killer Bee. Yuyen's next target was undoubtedly Bee. The fourth Reikage would not, let that happen. At the same time, news of the incident began to spread across the shinobi world. Motivated by the enormous bounty that Hiruzen Sarutobi and the other Kage had placed on Yuyen's head, countless bounty hunters began to mobilize. Everyone knew how terrifyingly powerful Shenron Yuyen was, but greed was a powerful motivator. Even a fierce tiger can be brought down by a pack of wolves. For these hunters, the risk was worth the reward. Surviving an encounter with him could not only earn them a fortune beyond their wildest dreams but also the chance to uncover his secrets. Ageless, immortal, undefeated. The temptation was too great to resist. It was a prize that made men tremble with desire. And so, almost as soon as Yujito Ni was killed, the news that Shenron Yuyen had appeared in the Land of Lightning spread like wildfire. Hurry! He's in the hidden cloud village. Haha, this is our chance. That massive fortune will be ours. Across the entire shinobi world, hidden organizations and rogue ninja alike began to stir, their eyes all turning toward a single destination. 122, Chapter 122, Extra, Converging Storms. Within hours, the entire shinobi world was thrown into chaos. The name Shenron Yuyen carried a weight that no one could ignore. In the past, legendary figures like Hashirama Senjo and Madara Uchiha had shaped the world, but even their combined might had been nothing before him. That fact alone was a terrifying reminder of his power. More importantly, decades had passed since his last appearance. No one knew what level of strength Tsukiyako had achieved in that time. For many, the massive bounty was only part of the appeal. This was a chance to witness a living god, a being who defied the natural laws of life and death. Fortune favors the bold, they told themselves. Legends were still told of those who had earned Yuan's favor in the past, individuals who became myths in their own right. The man himself was said to be immortal, invincible, and eternally young. For the ambitious and the desperate, even the chance to get close to such an existence was an irresistible temptation. Very few could turn it away. Meanwhile, in the land of fire, the atmosphere inside the Hokage's office in Konoha was suffocating. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, sat at his desk, flanked by the 3 village elders, Shimura Danzo, Yutaten Koharu, and Mitokado Homura. These 4 were masters of deception, old shinobi who rarely let their true emotions show. But now, the stress was clear on their faces. The fear that Shenron Yuan inspired in them was palpable. The political games and subtle manipulations they used to control others were completely useless against a being like him. They knew that Konoha was now in his sights, a target awaiting judgment, yet they had no realistic way to stop him. This feeling of helplessness was the true source of their anxiety. According to our latest intelligence, Shenron Yuan is heading for the Hidden Cloud Village, Hiruzen said, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was tired. We believe his true objective is the 8 tails. My master, Lord Hashirama, was able to control all 9-tailed beasts, but even he could only seal them away to be used as Jinchuriki. Yuan is different. Everyone knew that the tailed beasts possessed terrifying power, but their greatest flaw was that they were nearly impossible to control. Even the most skilled Jinchuriki lived with the constant risk of losing control and becoming a mindless monster. But such rules didn't seem to apply to Yuan. His unique ability to absorb and fuse bloodlines was on another level entirely. Not even Orochimaru's forbidden jutsu for immortality could compare. If Yuan was now collecting the tailed beasts, it could only mean one thing. He planned to fuse their power into himself. If he succeeded, his strength would grow to an unimaginable level. It's not all bad news, Hiruzen, Danzo said in his usual cold, clipped tone. Jiraiya and Orochimaru have both responded. They are willing to return to the village to help. He paused. However, Tsunade sent a clear reply. She refuses to get involved in any of Konoha's affairs. The faces of the other 3 hardened at the mention of her name. Humph. Once this is over, I don't care what Tsunade wants. She won't be allowed to simply run away from her duty, Hiruzen muttered, his expression pained. But things aren't that simple. Orochimaru has a condition for his return. Danzo's single visible eye locked onto Hiruzen. He wants to be the leader of Konoha. In other words, he wants to be the next Hokage. The air in the room grew colder. The elders' expressions shifted from anxiety to cold fury. They weren't entirely surprised that Orochimaru would try a stunt like this. After all, they themselves had schemed to push him out of the village years ago, partly because of his twisted experiments, and partly because they feared his ambition. Now, he was using their desperation to position himself as Konoha's savior. But as their eyes met, a silent understanding passed between them. In this desperate situation, Orochimaru's selfish ambition could be useful. Letting him rush headfirst into a confrontation with Yuan might not be such a bad thing. Hiruzen turned to look out the window, a faint, cynical smile touching his lips. Let him have his demands for now. Next, let's see if our bounty attracts any other useful pawns. While Konoha's leaders plotted, forces from all corners of the world were on the move. Powerful mercenaries, grizzled bounty hunters, and legendary shinobi who had been retired for years all began to emerge from the shadows. The return of Shenron Yuan was an event that no one wanted to miss. They all knew, however, that among the countless mercenaries and hunters, one group was far more dangerous than the rest, the Akatsuki. The Akatsuki was an infamous organization of S-rank rogue ninja. They had appeared only a few years ago but had quickly earned a terrifying reputation. They took on impossible missions and completed them with brutal efficiency. Often, they went far beyond their clients' requests. A mission to assassinate one person might end with an entire clan, village, or even a small nation being wiped from the map. With the Akatsuki now in play, the unfolding conflict was guaranteed to be a spectacular and bloody affair. At that same moment, in the land of lightning, Killer Bee, the Jinchuriki of the 8 Tails, was training in the Valley of Clouds and Lightning. He moved with a unique rhythm, flowing through the cascading waterfalls. Suddenly, a jolt ran through him as a deep voice rumbled in his mind. That man, Shenron Yuan, is coming this way, the 8 Tails, Jayaki, warned him. What? He's comin' for me, the great Killer Bee. If my judgment's right, his target is probably you and me. Be wrapped, striking a pose. Jayaki's voice was grim. This is serious. He's not like the others. Then what are we waiting for, G? Let's get ready to flee. As he said it, Killer Bee's confidence finally cracked. His small, circular sunglasses slipped from his nose and clattered against the rocks below, shattering into pieces. Run. But before he could even finish the word, the sky darkened. All around him, dense black clouds shot up from the ground like solid walls, stretching high into the air. In an instant, an invisible barrier sealed the entire valley, trapping him inside. Killer Bee's heart pounded in his chest. Oh no. Don't tell me, he's already here. 123, Chapter 123, Extra, Bow. The moment Killer Bee registered the danger, the sky above the valley of clouds and lightning vanished. It was completely blotted out by swirling dark clouds that formed an inescapable dome, sealing the gorge from the rest of the world. An invisible, crushing pressure slammed down on him, so immense that his body began to tremble uncontrollably. No way, he thought. What is this power? For years, Killer Bee's life had been relatively easy. As the Eight Tails Jinchuriki and the Raikage's younger brother, he was a strategic asset, a ultimate weapon kept in reserve. He rarely needed to fight seriously. When trouble arose, the fourth Raikage and Yujito Ni were usually the ones to handle it. The shinobi world had its conflicts, but for the most part, it had been peaceful. Bee had never faced a truly life-threatening battle. Until now. Jayaki's warning had been sudden, but the reality of the danger was far worse than he could have imagined. He could feel a strength that was completely off the charts. The opponent hadn't even shown himself yet, but the sheer force of his presence was enough to paralyze him with shock. It was terrifying. How could a being this powerful even exist? It has been a long time since I last visited this place, a calm voice echoed from the sky. High above, shadows and light converged, instantly forming a throne of jagged, blood-red ice that pulsed with a fiery glow. Seated upon it was Tsukiyako, his expression as serene as if he were merely observing the scenery. For him, destroying a tailed beast was a trivial act. He could wipe Konoha off the map just as easily. But after his previous encounter with the will of another world, he had decided to be more subtle. Besides, destroying a village like Konoha served no real purpose. The tailed beasts, however, were a different matter entirely. They were crucial to his plans. He knew that his recent actions and the creation of his 12 Kazuki would send ambitious men like Hiruzen Sarutobi into a panic. The whole shinobi world was about to be shaken by a storm of his own making. A man like Hiruzen would never willingly give up his position as Hokage, but fighting Tsukiyako directly was suicide. So Hiruzen's plan is to use a bounty to turn the world against me, Tsukiyako mused with a faint smile. How predictable. He was curious to see what tricks the famously cunning Hokage would try, but a simple bounty would only attract fools and second-rate shinobi. The true powerhouses of the world would be too wise to challenge him. Hiruzen was likely using the bounty as a distraction to hide his real strategy. But in Tsukiyako's eyes, it was all a ridiculous game. Soon, none of it would matter. The shinobi world was about to undergo a change so monumental it would shatter its very foundations. Dozens of kilometers away from the sealed gorge, a squadron of hidden cloud ninja raced through the trees. Leading them was the fourth Raikage, his usually stern face now twisted with anxiety and shock. This was completely unfair. For generations, the name Shenron Yueyen was spoken of as a god in the shinobi world, a being so powerful that even Hashirama and Madara were his lessers. The hidden cloud had competed with Konoha for years, but those were just minor squabbles between villages. They would never, in their wildest dreams, dare to provoke a true monster like Tsukiyako. But the worst had happened anyway. The one thing they had that Tsukiyako could possibly want was the very source of their village's strength, their tailed beasts. They had once been proud to possess two of them, the Two Tails, Matatabi, and the Eight Tails, Jayaki. Now, as the Raikage rushed to save his brother, he couldn't help but think that it was all a curse. If they had never had the tailed beasts, would this catastrophe have been avoided? What do I do? What can I do? He thought desperately. Am I supposed to fight a god? Back in the gorge, the throne of blood and fire descended from the sky. Killer Bee looked up and saw the figure seated upon it, a man who hadn't been seen in years, but whose legend had never faded. Shenron Yueyen. Ageless. Immortal. Invincible. You're in the presence of a god, Killer Bee, Tsukiyako's voice echoed, not as a shout, but as a calm, world-shattering thunderclap that struck B's very soul. "So why are you still standing?" "Not good," B thought, but his body was no longer his to command. He could feel his blood stop flowing in his veins. His chakra froze. His bones locked in place. In that instant, it felt as though his soul had been ripped from his body, leaving him a powerless puppet. "B, I can't move." Jayaki roared in his mind, his voice filled with a panic he had never shown before. He's controlling you with just his voice." They had known they were facing the most powerful being in the world. They had not underestimated him, but they never imagined that their combined strength wouldn't even be enough to withstand a single sentence. Thud. With a sickening crunch of bone, Killer B's body slammed onto the ground, forced onto his knees. The pressure was so intense that cracks appeared in the stone beneath him, and blood began to pour from his eyes, nose, and mouth. "The power of a tailed beast is not something a mortal like you is worthy of possessing," Tsukiyako said, his voice still unnervingly calm. "I didn't collect them all years ago because it didn't suit my plans. Now, the time has come. I want them." His eyes seemed to contain entire galaxies, swirling with suns and moons. "As for you so-called Jinchuriki, you are flawed creations that should have never existed. You can all go to hell." The moment the words left his lips, Jayaki screamed inside Killer B's mind. An unbelievably terrifying power reached into B's body, bypassing flesh and bone, and took hold of the tailed beast's very essence. Then, it began to pull. 124, Chapter 124, Extra, a god interrupted. The moment Tsukiyako's power touched him, Killer B felt a violent tearing sensation from within. The perfect fusion he shared with the eight tails, a bond that made them stronger than the sum of their parts, was instantly reversed. A horrifying repulsion ignited between them, turning his own body into a prison that was being ripped apart from the inside. Crack! The sound of his own bones shattering echoed in his ears. The Jinchuriki who once fought Sasuke Uchiha's entire team to a standstill was now breaking apart like a porcelain doll. "No, no." Killer B choked out, blood filling his mouth. "This ain't the end of my story, this can't be." He was the Reikage's brother, a perfect Jinchuriki who had lived a life of honor and respect. He was so well protected that he had never even suffered a serious injury. But that was the past. In an instant, his privileged life was over, and his body was completely submerged in his own blood. A low, agonized roar escaped his lips as a terrifying wave of chakra erupted from him. The next moment, his body exploded in a shower of gore. Boom! From the bloody mist that was once Killer B, a massive entity of pure chakra, the eight tails, Jayaki, burst forth. It scattered its energy in all directions, desperately trying to flee. Before a tailed beast fuses with a Jinchuriki, it exists as a physical being. Afterward, they are two souls in one body. With that body now destroyed, even a being as powerful as Jayaki was critically wounded and exposed. More than anything, it didn't want to die, and it certainly didn't want to become another tool for Tsukiyako. After all, tailed beasts couldn't truly be killed. If their chakra was completely dispersed, it would scatter across the world, and over hundreds or even thousands of years, it would slowly reform. The tailed beast would be reborn, but with no memory of its past life. It was a form of immortality, but it was nothing compared to the true, unending existence that Tsukiyako possessed. At a time like this, you still think you can escape. High above, Tsukiyako watched with a cold, chilling smile. He had intentionally allowed the tailed beast a brief moment of hope, a small illusion that it could get away. It was all a game to him. It was a pity it had to end. Bang! Invisible chains of force materialized within the barrier, lashing out from all directions. They wrapped around Jayaki's fleeing form, trapping it completely. The power of a tailed beast is the second strongest force in this world, Tsukiyako mused aloud, his voice calm. It's surpassed only by Kekii Genkai, and of course, neither can compare to a Kekii Mora. He smiled. Then again, if I wanted to fuse the bloodlines of every clan in existence, it would be a simple matter. Stop. Just as Tsukiyako raised his hand to claim his prize, a booming voice echoed through the gorge. The next second, an enormous toad crashed through the energy barrier, shattering it like glass. The deafening sound of its arrival shook the valley. Shenren Yuan. Standing atop the toad's head with his arms crossed was a man with long, white hair. There was no trace of his usual grin. His face was set with an extreme solemnity as he stared at the godlike figure on the throne. It was Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin. Whether he liked it or not, he had to be here. Behind him was Konoha, the home he still loved, and Hiruzen Sarutobi, the man who had been his teacher. No matter what mistakes his master had made, Jiraiya couldn't stand by and let a monster like Tsukiyako destroy everything. Jiraiya, Tsukiyako's eyes flashed with a captivating, dangerous light. Jiraiya felt a tremor of fear run through his entire body. It seems you've grown tired of living. But before he could act, the air itself seemed to ripple. In 3 different directions, space began to twist, opening into dark voids that did not seem to lead anywhere in the physical world. From each one, a wonderfully strange and powerful energy began to pour out. This is. Even Tsukiyako's calm expression shifted into one of genuine interest. Others might not recognize this unique power, but he knew exactly what it was. In the shinobi world, beyond the power of chakra, there was another, deeper force. Natural energy. Anyone who could master it could become a sage, an immortal. The beings now arriving were the legendary sages from the 3 great holy lands of the shinobi world, Mount Myaboku, Shikotsu Forest, and Ryokai Cave. 125, Chapter 125, Extra, an unworthy title. As the battle in the Valley of Clouds and Lightning reached its peak, the 4th Reikage, suddenly froze in his tracks. A cold, inexplicable fear washed over him, hollowing out his chest. It felt as if a vital part of himself had just been violently ripped away. He couldn't understand it, but a thought he didn't dare to believe forced its way into his mind. My brother, B, is dead. An overwhelming wave of sorrow crashed down on him, so powerful it felt like it was stealing the air from his lungs. For a moment, the Reikage couldn't breathe. His relationship with Killer B was more than just family, they were partners, and he had always had absolute faith in his brother's strength. B was powerful on his own, and with Jayaki at his side, he was nearly invincible. In the entire shinobi world, there were few who could even injure him, let alone defeat him. But that was under normal circumstances. This wasn't a normal fight. Their opponent was Shenron Yuan. The 4th Reikage refused to accept the reality that was waiting for him, but he couldn't stop the horrifying truth from settling in his heart. Faster! He roared, his voice cracking with grief. Hurry! With a sharp whistle of displaced air, he pushed his speed to its absolute limit. Behind him, the elite shinobi of the hidden cloud struggled to keep pace, their faces grim and tense. Back at the valley, the world seemed to shake. The arrival of the sages was accompanied by colossal waves of multicolored light that lit up the sky. 3 towering, terrifying figures now stood before Tsukiyako, their sheer presence warping the air around them. The Toad Sage of Mount Myaboku, the White Snake Sage of Ryokai Cave, the Slug Sage of Shikotsu Forest. They were beings from the Sage Realms, holy lands that existed parallel to the human world. By mastering the natural energy of these realms, a shinobi could learn sage arts and become an immortal, a true sage. And now, the 3 great sages themselves had appeared, their ancient and imposing forms staring down the man on the throne with extreme solemnity. Natural energy is indeed an interesting power, Tsukiyako commented, his expression still perfectly calm. He had expected this. The moment he began to move against the great villages, he knew the gears of fate would turn. Jiraiya, one of the legendary Sannin, would never stand by and do nothing. But Jiraiya also knew that his own strength, while great by mortal standards, was nothing to a god. To have any hope of confronting him, he would have had to call for reinforcements of the highest caliber. And so, he had brought the immortals. Tsukiyako, Jiraiya called out from his position on Gamabunta's head, his voice heavy. Your strength may be legendary, but this world isn't yours to command. If you continue down this path, the entire shinobi world will face a monumental change, and the price will be paid by ordinary people. Tsukiyako was not surprised by Jiraiya's defiant attitude. It was exactly in character for the man who saw himself as a protector of the common good. Is that so? Tsukiyako replied, a lazy, mocking smile on his face. And do you clowns truly believe you can stop me? He gestured with a single finger towards the 3 colossal beings, his eyes filled with indifference and disdain. The Toad Sage, the White Snake Sage, the Slug Sage, he said, tasting the titles. How amusing. You are nothing but spirit monsters, ancient beasts who have cultivated power from plants and the earth. How dare you presume to call yourselves sages, or immortals? He slowly rose from his throne and took a single step forward into the empty air. In a world where I exist, he declared, his voice cutting through the valley, what is a sage? The moment he finished speaking, a terrifying, towering aura erupted from his body, surging violently in all directions like a tidal wave of pure power. Not good, the three sages seemed to think as one, their ancient eyes becoming extremely grave. This was a pressure beyond anything they had ever known. 126, Chapter 126, Extra, Tsukiyako vs. The Three Great Sages. No, what is he trying to do? The moment Tsukiyako made his move, a tremor of dread ran through the sages of the three great sacred lands. Whether it was the great toad sage, the white snake sage, or the slug sage, they all felt a cold knot of fear tighten in their ancient hearts. They had appeared this time for one reason: Tsukiyako's return was clearly different from before. In the past, he had awed the shinobi world with his immense power but had rarely interfered with its development. It was because of his hands-off approach that the tailed beasts were distributed and the system of ninja villages and nations was allowed to form. If he had wished it, the world would have simply become his personal empire, ruled by a single, supreme emperor. But this time was different. The feeling they got from his return was that Tsukiyako intended to shatter the world's current order. If he truly planned to forge his own empire now, the entire shinobi world would face a catastrophe of unprecedented scale. This was not a problem that a single village like Konoha, or a single man like Sarutobi Hiruzen, could possibly handle. The sages knew that stopping a being of Tsukiyako's power would come at an unimaginable cost. Even more tragically, they knew that even if they paid that price, there was no guarantee of success. But as they stood before him, they realized they had no other choice. They had no path of retreat. The situation has reached the point we feared. All our worries have become reality. We have no choice but to use our full strength. Considering Tsukiyako's past deeds, even if every nation, every ninja village, and every powerful shinobi in the world united against him, they probably still wouldn't be his match. After this battle, I'm afraid our sacred lands will be nothing but a memory. Their thoughts converged in an instant, and the eyes of the three great sages met in a moment of grim understanding. This time, they appeared in their true, colossal forms, a sign of respect for Tsukiyako's power, but also a clear display of their profound apprehension. He was strong, far too strong. At that same moment, Jiraiya, who had been standing on the head of his giant toad, leaped back, putting distance between himself and the confrontation. An expression of deep worry creased his face. "This is looking really bad," he muttered to himself. Death was a part of a shinobi's life, but this was different. The ones preparing for battle were the sages of the three great sacred lands, beings considered nearly immortal due to their unique abilities and mastery of sage arts. For all the powerful figures the shinobi world had produced over the ages, the sages were in a league of their own, possessing vitality that was almost indestructible. If they were to lose here, it meant there would be no one left in the entire world capable of stopping the divine being known as Tsukiyako. Heh, I didn't expect to catch such a good show. Just beyond the barrier of Kumare Gorge, a figure hidden completely in the shadows spoke in a low voice. This man was none other than the famed copy ninja of Konoha, Kakashi Hatake. Or rather, the former copy ninja. After successfully eliminating Sarutobi Shinosuke and Sarutobi Asuma, Kakashi was now a wanted man, a rogue ninja of the Hidden Leaf Village. For Kakashi, however, this was a liberation. His father and his entire family had been systematically ruined by Sarutobi Hiruzen. The Hatake clan was once a prominent family in Konoha, and his father, Sakumo Hatake, had held the powerful position of Umbu commander. But what had been the result? Through the shady manipulations of Hiruzen's inner circle, Sakumo had not only lost his honor but had his reputation destroyed, ultimately being forced to take his own life. Even in death, he never received the justice he deserved, instead falling deeper into a trap designed by his enemies. And Kakashi, his son and successor, was forced to run errands for the very man responsible for his family's ruin. It was a disgrace. An absolute, unbearable shame. Because of this, Kakashi felt no regret for killing Hiruzen's sons. In fact, he only felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I really didn't expect Jiraiya would go this far for Konoha, he thought, his gaze fixed on the looming figures of the sages. But I wonder. Shaking his head, Kakashi suppressed his emotions and melted back into the surrounding darkness, becoming just another shadow. All around Kumare Gorge, similar whispers echoed from the darkness. My God, what a terrifying disturbance. Has the battle already started? I just got the latest intel. That's Jiraiya, one of Konoha's legendary Sannin. He's summoned the sages from the three great sacred lands. I heard that Senju Hashirama, the god of shinobi who founded Konoha, also practiced sage art. To be able to master sage art is to be practically immortal. Far too many eyes were on this spectacle. The attention wasn't just due to the immense fame of Tsukiyako, but also because of the astonishing bounty that Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen had placed on his head. More importantly, however, was the location itself. Kumare Gorge was a forbidden land that originally belonged to the hidden cloud village of the Land of Lightning. The tailed beasts and their Jinchuriki had always been vital strategic assets for the great nations. The hidden cloud was particularly powerful, possessing not only Yujito ni, the Jinchuriki of the two tails whose fusion rate was incredibly high, but also Killer Bee, the perfect Jinchuriki of the even stronger eight tails. If Tsukiyako's conflict with the hidden cloud escalated, the entire shinobi world could be dragged into an overwhelming catastrophe. Combined with Tsukiyako's previous declaration that he intended to hold Sarutobi Hiruzen accountable, it was clear that his return was anything but simple. But what no one had expected was that Jiraiya would succeed in summoning the sages of the three great sacred lands. The Great Toad Sage, the White Snake Sage, and the Slug Sage. These were legendary beings that most shinobi would never see in their entire lives. Yet now, all three had appeared together to confront Tsukiyako directly. It was destined to be a legendary battle, a clash that would shake the very foundations of their world, and no one dared to look away. 127, Chapter 127, Extra, One Body, Three Forms. Boom! An explosive shockwave of raw power erupted from Tsukiyako and the three sages, sweeping out in every direction. The entire Kumare Gorge was instantly engulfed by a terrifying gale, and the continuous roar of the clash made the hidden onlookers feel as if they had been cast into hell itself. The weaker shinobi among them didn't even have time to react before the sheer force of the shockwave vaporized them into a fine red mist. Quick, retreat! The barriers around the gorge must be shattered after a blast like that. If we stay here any longer, we're all going to die. In that moment, the powerful shinobi who had gathered hoping to take advantage of the chaos scrambled to flee. Just moments before the sages and Tsukiyako had made their move, they thought they might find an opportunity. It was clear now that they had drastically overestimated their own strength and completely misunderstood the power they were witnessing. Simply put, their own weakness had limited their imagination. For years, the power of the divine being Tsukiyako had been the stuff of legends, but today, they were seeing his true terror firsthand. Amid the chaos, Jiraiya and the hidden Kakashi Hatake also retreated, moving swiftly in the opposite direction of the panicked crowd. But while Kakashi was unburdened, a heavy weight seemed to press down on Jiraiya. He had summoned the great sages, beings who were practically immortal, to deal with Tsukiyako. Yet, judging from Tsukiyako's calm and almost bored demeanor, Jiraiya knew that even with the sages of the three sacred lands fighting together, killing him would be an incredibly difficult task. He was horrified to realize that this devastating explosion was only the initial probe between the two sides. The power already on display was terrifying to the extreme. Meanwhile, high in the air, the gazes of the Great Toad Sage, the White Snake Sage, and the Slug Sage met. In the next instant, they unleashed their true power. Three colossal figures that seemed to touch the sky appeared from nothing. One was an enormous toad, another a giant white snake that rode upon the clouds, and the last was a gigantic slug-like creature that stretched across the horizon, its body secreting countless smaller slugs. Although the three sages were ancient beings born from the very fabric of the shinobi world, even their power had limits. The problem was that Tsukiyako had become a threat to the entire world's survival. At a time like this, if they didn't act, he would eventually gather all nine-tailed beasts, and any chance of stopping him would be lost forever. Even now, as they revealed their true forms, they were not confident they could suppress him. Good. Facing the three massive beings before him, Tsukiyako's face showed no fear or surprise. Instead, a hint of genuine excitement flickered in his eyes. For years, both in his former world and now in the shinobi world, he had been completely invincible. But invincibility was its own kind of prison, an unimaginable loneliness that had almost completely extinguished his desire to fight. With the powerful subordinates he had gathered over the years, he rarely had a reason to act personally. This time, however, was different. Though his followers were powerful, they were no match for the sages of the three great sacred lands. In a situation like this, his personal intervention was not just an option, it was a necessity. Swish, swish, swish. In a flash, Tsukioko's single figure split, and three identical versions of him appeared in mid-air. The next moment, however, these three figures began to change in shocking ways. The eyes of the first figure transformed, the pale, pupil-less Byakugan, one of the three great dojutsu, appearing in his sockets. The Byakugan was the exclusive Kekkei Genkai of Konoha's Hyuga clan, a bloodline so fiercely protected that the clan used the caged bird seal to prevent it from ever falling into outside hands. But this figure displayed more than just the Hyuga's eyes. His entire body began to glow with power. First gate, open. Second gate, open. Third gate. Fourth gate. In a brief instant, a power that seemed to push the human body past its absolute limits erupted from him. It was the 8 Inner Gates formation, a legendary taijutsu technique that could grant a user godlike power at the cost of their own life. And in that moment, the first of Tsukioko's clones had already reached that terrifying level. Boom! This was only the beginning. Almost simultaneously, the second clone made its move. Its dark pupils instantly swirled into the crimson red of the Sharingan, the famous dojutsu of the Uchiha clan. The Sharingan was a powerful technique that was, for all practical purposes, exclusive to the Uchiha. While there were rare instances of the Byakugan being transplanted, the only known exception for the Sharingan was Kakashi Heitake. Yet many believed the eye was more of a burden to Kakashi than a gift, as only a true Uchiha could ever hope to master its full power. But now, a second exception had appeared, one far more monstrous than Kakashi could ever be. In a single second, the eyes of Tsukioko's second clone shifted. The single Tomo spun, becoming 2, then 3. As the triple Tomo spun to a perfect blur, the 3 marks merged, transforming into the distinct pattern of the legendary Mangekyo Sharingan. At that moment, even in their colossal forms, the sages of the 3 great sacred lands felt a profound sense of dread. The power of this man, Tsukioko, was even more terrifying than they had ever anticipated. 128, Chapter 128, Extra, The Serpent's Return. No, how is this possible? The scene unfolding before them plunged the 3 sages into an unimaginable state of shock. For all their eons of existence, their greatest strength had always been their mastery over the power of nature. But they knew that the inherent power of a shinobi, their unique talents and bloodlines, was a force that could not be underestimated. At the very pinnacle of these abilities were the Kekkei Genkai, inherited traits of terrifying power. The Byakugan and the Sharingan were prime examples, dojutsu that had shaken the shinobi world for generations. To see the Byakugan's 360-degree vision and insight combined with the overwhelming physical power of the 8 Inner Gates formation was to witness something beyond comprehension. And that wasn't even touching upon the second power Tsukioko's clone was now displaying, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion ripped through the air, and the entire Kumare Gorge roared in its death throes. A chain reaction of blasts tore through the canyon from one end to the other, sending shattered rock and debris flying for miles. The gorge, once a proud and easily defensible symbol of the hidden cloud village, was utterly annihilated in a matter of moments. This can't be happening. Is that, the Byakugan and the Sharingan? And, a Mangekyo Sharingan? Outside the battlefield, the powerful shinobi observing from a safe distance were once again paralyzed with shock. They had expected Tsukioko to finally reveal his true abilities when facing the sages, but this was beyond anything they could have conceived. They had called him a divine being mostly due to legends of his strength, but what they were seeing now was not just power, it was something fundamentally incomprehensible. Damn it! Why did it have to be like this? Not far from the ruins of the gorge, several figures flashed into view amidst the rubble. Their leader was none other than the 4th Reikage, one of the 5 Kage. But the Reikage lacked his usual explosive energy. He looked as if he had aged decades in an instant. As he stared at the smoldering crater that was once Kumare Gorge, a wave of absolute despair washed over him. Before arriving, he had clung to a sliver of desperate hope for his brother, Killer B. He'd imagined scenarios where Tsukioko, impressed by B's talent, might have captured him, perhaps even offered him a place among his elite followers. If that had happened, it might have even been a strange sort of opportunity for the hidden cloud. But looking at the sheer, indiscriminate destruction before him, he knew such thoughts were nothing more than a foolish dream. What do we do? What in the world are we supposed to do now? Oh God, this is terrifying. Is he going to destroy our entire village today? The hidden cloud shinobi behind the wreckage were trembling uncontrollably. For years, with Konoha in a state of decline, the hidden cloud had been growing stronger, faster. They had started to believe they were the most powerful village, an arrogant mistake they were now paying for. Faced with a single man who could effortlessly crush not only their Jinchuriki but a sacred landmark as well, they felt a chilling powerlessness. It was terrifying. Truly, deeply terrifying. The news of the battle spread through the shinobi world like a wildfire, and every faction fell silent. This was different from Tsukiyoko's previous declaration in Konoha. This time, he had taken action himself, and his power had proven to be even greater than the legends claimed. It exceeded anything they could have possibly imagined. And yet, the more terrifying he was, the more everyone craved to know the true limits of his strength. This time, they got their answer. In the Land of Fire, at the Konoha Hokage's office, Hiruzen Sarutobi and his advisors, Homura and Koharu, sat in silence. An unshakable worry hung in the air. They had to admit it, whether they liked it or not. Tsukiyoko was now the center of the entire world. Wherever he appeared, that place became the focal point of all events. I can't believe Jiraiya actually managed to bring out the sages of the three great sacred lands, Homura said, breaking the silence. The outcome is still undecided, Koharu added, though her voice lacked conviction. The power of the sages is on a level that no mere human can attain. Even if Tsukiyoko's combat power is as strong as it seems, he's still just one person, Hiruzen said, his fingers steepled before him. He may have abilities and techniques we don't understand, but at the end of the day, he is alone. They exchanged glances, each voicing thoughts they weren't sure they truly believed. They were all in the same boat now, caught in a storm they had no power to control. Bang! The door to the office was suddenly thrown open. Four young shinobi in umbu masks instantly took up defensive positions. A tall, gaunt man with a cold, pale face and a chilling smile on his lips stepped slowly into the room. Behind him followed a short, thin bodyguard who looked almost skeletal. The man's voice, a soft hiss that was neither male nor female, slithered through the silent room. My, look at what the years have done to you, sensei. He let his golden, snake-like eyes wander over the old men. I didn't expect to see Konoha brought so low by your leadership. A cruel smile played on his lips. It seems that I, Orochimaru, am the only one truly suited for the position of Hokage after all. As his words echoed in the office, the air instantly turned to ice. 129, Chapter 129, Extra, Desperate Measures. As Orochimaru's voice faded, a deathly silence fell over the Hokage's office. The air grew heavy, thick with tension. Third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi's expression, already grim, hardened into a mask of stone. The elders, including Danzo, wore looks of incredible complexity, a mixture of fear, disgust, and grim necessity. Orochimaru. Of course, they recognized him. How could they ever forget? The truth was, Orochimaru's fall from grace was inextricably linked to the very men standing in this room. Hiruzen's mind flashed back through the years. He remembered his brilliant, twisted student and the political maneuvering required to keep him from the Hokage seat. He remembered the tragedies that followed, the loss of Noeke, the rise and fall of the fourth Hokage, whose grave was now just another patch of grass. He had successfully severed all of Orochimaru's ties to Konoha, turning his most promising student into his greatest enemy. He'd done it to protect the village. And now, in a moment of terrifying irony, he needed that enemy to save it. The situation felt hauntingly familiar. The last time Konoha faced a threat of this magnitude, it was the nine-tailed fox. Now, it was the divine being, Tsukiyoko. What's wrong, sensei? Orochimaru's lips curled into a cold smile as he watched his former teacher. You look unwell. He took another slow step into the room. My presence here can only mean one thing, you finally agreed to all the conditions we discussed. He let out a soft chuckle. Besides, as the old saying goes, inviting a god is easy, but sending him away is hard. Now that I'm here. Orochimaru's golden eyes swept over everyone present, lingering on Hiruzen. Can I begin my work as the fifth Hokage? The words hung in the air, a final, arrogant power play. Hiruzen and Danzo exchanged a look. They had reached out to Orochimaru as a desperate, last-ditch effort, a test to see if he would even respond. They never expected him to walk right through the front door. More importantly, given the power he now radiated, perhaps he truly did possess a way to contend with Tsukiyako. To fight a monster who could seemingly pluck the stars from the sky, one couldn't use ordinary methods. Ordinary methods would fail. Before this goes any further, Hiruzen said, his voice low and steady, fixing his gaze on his former student. Tell me your plan. Do you truly believe you can stop him? The other elders turned their attention to Orochimaru. From the moment he had appeared, he had commanded the room, treating them all with complete disregard. The attitude infuriated them, but they knew they were long past the point of letting pride dictate their decisions. They had no other cards to play. Hee, of course, a mysterious smile touched the corner of Orochimaru's mouth. In fact, I've wanted to test my skills against the so-called divine being for a very long time. When Tsukiyako last dominated the world, Orochimaru was just a child, too young to comprehend such power. By the time he had grown into his own formidable strength, Tsukiyako had already vanished, becoming a legend. Orochimaru was naturally curious to see if the legend lived up to the reality. My first step, Orochimaru said, his voice dropping to a sinister hiss, is to immediately take control of the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, Naruto Uzumaki. Meanwhile, back at the ruins of the Hidden Clouds territory, the explosion of Kumare Gorge sent countless onlookers scattering like frightened animals. They fled in every direction, wanting no part in a battle between gods. However, among the chaos, the true experts of the shinobi world remained, lurking in the shadows, their eyes fixed on the battle. All the members of the Akatsuki were present. As expected of Tsukiyako, one of the cloaked figures murmured. A power like this is nearly unheard of, even for us. His goal seems to be the same as ours, another added. He's collecting the tailed beasts to achieve his own ends. From the shadows, they watched the man in midair, a single being holding his own against the three colossal sages, an absolute advantage clear in his movements. He was Tsukiyako, the unparalleled legend of the shinobi world. Even the Akatsuki's leader, Pain, watched with complex emotions swirling behind his Rinnegan eyes. As Nagato, he had known nothing but tragedy. His life in the Hidden Rain village, his growth, his pain, it had all been part of a grander scheme orchestrated by others. He didn't know that yet, of course. In his own mind, he was a savior, a god destined to bring peace to the world through pain. It was a role Jiraiya himself had encouraged, seeing the legendary Rinnegan in his eyes. But as he watched Tsukiyako, a being who seemed to have everything under his control, Nagato felt a deep, gnawing envy. The legend said Tsukiyako was ageless, immortal, and invincible. That first attribute alone was enough to consume Nagato's thoughts. Every time he used the Rinnegan, he could feel his own life force draining away. Even with the powerful vitality of his Uzumaki blood, he knew he couldn't withstand the strain forever. But if he could uncover Tsukiyako's secrets, the source of his immortality, perhaps he could eliminate that weakness within himself. That was one of the main reasons he had come here. That, and the fact that they, the Akatsuki, could not allow a rival to claim the power of the tailed beasts. 130, Chapter 130, Extra, The Serpent's First Move. Rumble. Another wave of impossibly wild energy erupted from the heart of the battlefield, and the faces of all who watched fell once more into shock. They had all heard the legends of the divine being, Tsukiyako. But to witness his power firsthand was to understand that the stories did not do him justice. What no one could have ever predicted was that he would face the sages of the three great sacred lands, beings so powerful they were like stars in the night sky, to be looked up to but never touched, and not only hold his own but completely dominate them. He was fighting 3-on-1 and was unequivocally winning. At that moment, high in the air, Tsukiyako's third clone fully materialized. The power radiating from it made the ancient sages turn pale with a dread they had not felt in millennia. This power, it's impossible. My senses cannot be deceiving me, but what I feel should not exist. The eyes of the great toad sage, the white snake sage, and the slug sage were wide with a solemn, dawning horror. Through their sage art, they could perceive the very fabric of the world, and this third clone was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The first two clones wielded terrifying power, but they were still comprehensible. This one was different. It felt as if it had been condensed from the shinobi world itself, perfectly and seamlessly integrated with nature. It was perfect. To the sage's senses, there was no other word for it. The power of bloodlines, the flow of chakra, the harmony of sage art, and the raw fury of the tailed beasts, all of it was fused together within that single being. The aura it gave off felt absolute and irresistible, as if it were the true, perfect life form of this world, and all other things, including the sages who had witnessed history itself unfold, were merely flawed imitations. "This show has gone on long enough," a voice echoed from above, calm and final. "It's time for it to end." An ornate throne of ice materialized in the air, and Tsukioko's true body appeared upon it, looking down on the battle. An aura of complete separation radiated from him, a feeling of being utterly alien to their world that made the sages profoundly uncomfortable. They had dared to attack him relying on two things, their mastery of sage art and their nearly indestructible, immortal bodies. Now, they realized neither mattered. What was worse, they understood with sickening clarity that in the few short moments they had been fighting, Tsukioko had not just been battling them, he had been studying them. He had completely analyzed their power, understood it, and created a clone that surpassed it in every way. "Now, we are in trouble," the thought passed between the three sages as their eyes met again. They had prepared for the worst when they decided to intervene, but they had never truly believed they could be erased. They were living relics, ancient beings who had survived for countless ages. The concept of something that could truly threaten their existence had always been theoretical. But as they looked at Tsukioko, they felt a genuine, primal fear. What in the world is going on? Hidden in the distance, Jiraiya felt his blood run cold. He, too, had noticed the shift in the battle. He had paid a tremendous price to bring the three sages here, knowing it was a desperate gamble. Decades ago, Tsukioko had defeated the combined might of the Senjo and Uchiha clans, along with the tailed beasts. Jiraiya knew that simply uniting the five great nations would be useless. His gamble had been a subtle one. He had bet that Tsukioko, having become a divine being, might have developed some form of divinity, a reluctance to simply slaughter them all. That way, win or lose, there might be a chance to negotiate, to salvage something from the wreckage. He saw now how foolish he had been. Things were not going according to plan, they were spiraling into the worst possible outcome. It was clear now that not only would the sages be annihilated, but the entire Hidden Cloud village and everyone in it would become sacrifices in this one-sided war. Ha 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 ha. Yes. Destroy it all. Let it all be completely destroyed. Elsewhere in the darkness, Kakashi Hatake watched the scene with a wild, ecstatic smile. One could say he had completely fallen into darkness. A person's life could either be calm or it could be insane, and from the beginning, he knew there was only one path left for him. At that very same moment, in the Land of Fire, a quieter but no less significant event was taking place. Within the walls of the Konoha ninja village, Orochimaru officially took control from Hiruzen Sarutobi, becoming the fifth Hokage. His first act was not a public address or a meeting with the council. Under the cover of night, he moved directly to the Konoha student dormitory and took control of a sleeping Naruto Uzumaki. As the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox, Naruto was the single most important strategic asset in the village. Orochimaru knew that Tsukioko's goal was to unite all the tailed beasts, and he would inevitably come for the nine tails. By securing the boy, Orochimaru was setting his own grand plan into motion. When that day came, it would be a contest. And whether Tsukioko's divine power was superior or Orochimaru's cunning was sharper was, for now, still an unknown. 131, Chapter 131, A God's Judgment, the Finale. Konoha Ninja Village, Ninja Dormitories. Naruto Uzumaki's eyes snapped open. He had been sound asleep, but a sudden, gut-wrenching sense of crisis made his entire body tremble. "What's going on?" he whispered, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Why do I feel so scared all of a sudden?" The moment the thought crossed his mind, the air around him exploded with terrifying rays of light. A powerful and oppressive aura crashed down from above, slamming directly into him. Crack! The entire dorm room disintegrated. The bed Naruto was on instantly turned to dust. Before he could even think to resist, an immense force slammed him to his knees, forcing him to the ground. In a flash, four crimson stakes of energy shot from the shadows, piercing his arms and legs and pinning him helplessly to the floor. An indescribable horror engulfed him. It felt as if the demon sealed deep inside of him, a beast he could barely comprehend, was being forcibly awakened. What is happening?" he cried out, his voice choked with fear. Before he could process anything, more figures landed around him, their movements silent and swift. Twisting his head with great difficulty, Naruto's eyes widened in shock. The figures surrounding him were all Konoha ninja, the village's most powerful jonin and even members of the Hokage's personal Anbu guard. Without the power of the Nine Tails, Naruto knew he was no match for any one of them. A single one of these shinobi could crush him into dust without a second thought. The difference in their strength was like the distance between heaven and earth. He couldn't understand. Why would his own village's ninja attack him with such terrifying force? Ha. It seems the Nine-Tails seal on this brat is still stable, a soft, hissing voice commented from nearby. You've had your hands full these past few years, sensei. A giant, winding python emerged from the shadows, and standing atop its head was Orochimaru. Naruto stared, his heart seizing with a new kind of fear. He didn't know who this man was, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that he meant to harm him. The question was, what had he ever done to him? At that moment, Hiruzen Sarutobi and the other members of the Hokage's council appeared. Their gazes toward Naruto were heavy and complicated. For Hiruzen, the boy represented two conflicting truths. First, he was the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, a strategic asset of Konoha, a weapon to be managed. But he was also the son of his student, Minato Namikaze, making Naruto his grand student. Over the years, he had failed to take care of the boy, failed to fulfill his duty as a guardian and mentor. Now, seeing Orochimaru treat Naruto with such brutal cruelty, his heart ached with a profound and complicated guilt. This was happening not just because of the Nine Tails, but because of his own inaction. His failure to stop Tsukiyako had forced them to turn to a monster like Orochimaru. Shimura Danzo's gaze was also complex, but his was laced with a cold focus. He relished these moments of chaos and decisive action. He knew that with Orochimaru on the move, the stage was now set for a confrontation between him and Tsukiyako. In Danzo's pragmatic judgment, very few in the world could stand against the divine being. He certainly couldn't. Among the legendary Sannin, only Orochimaru stood a chance. Tsunade and Jiraiya were powerful, but they lacked Orochimaru's single most important quality. Defeating Orochimaru wasn't impossible, but killing him was a different matter entirely. His true strength had always been his uncanny ability to survive. Kimura Gorge. Boom, boom, boom. The battle reached its crescendo, and waves of unprecedented destruction rolled out for hundreds of miles. Even the powerful shinobi who had retreated to a great distance were not safe. Many who let their curiosity get the better of them were vaporized by the shockwaves. Those who survived were left staring at a scene of unimaginable terror. My God, is this really a level that humans can reach? How is this even possible? Before their eyes was a scene they would have never dared to imagine. The three great sages, beings they believed to be immortal, as timeless as the heavens, were battered and covered in blood. Their colossal forms were torn and broken, and worse, their proud, seemingly infinite well of natural energy was rapidly fading. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they would never have believed it possible. It was a sight that completely shattered their understanding of the world. So-called immortal arts and natural power, Tsukiyako's cold voice echoed from the sky. It amounts to nothing more than this. He looked down at the broken forms of the ancient sages, his expression one of pure contempt. Since you were so arrogant as to seek your own deaths, then I shall grant your wish. The moment he spoke, the very air began to churn, gathering a storm of violent, untamed power. It was clear Tsukiyako had no more interest in dragging out a battle of this magnitude. He raised his hand, and all of that power surged downward, a final, overwhelming wave aimed at the battered bodies of the three sages.
Every novel listed in the description comes with permanent access to the audiobook on Telegram. You pay once, and if the novel is still ongoing, you'll receive all future updates automatically. No extra cost. Choose your novel from the description, then DM me on Telegram, WhatsApp, or Discord. After payment via PayPal, Ko-Fi, or Patreon, you'll get instant access. Simple, secure, lifetime listening. Guys, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Your support means a lot.